Nero Wolfe and the Billionaire's bunker. The last Friday in October brought one of those perfect autumn mornings that make even hardened New Yorkers forget they live in a concrete jungle. Clear sky, crisp air tinged with wood smoke, and sunshine that made the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street look almost cheerful. I was at my desk in the office, working through correspondence and trying to decide whether accepting Lily Rowan's invitation to some charity auction was worth an evening of pretending to understand modern art, when the doorbell rang at 10:34 a.m. Bad timing. Nero Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms with Theodore Horstman, conducting his morning ritual with the 10,000 orchids that occupy the entire top floor of our 4-story fortress. Plant room hours, 9 to 11 in the morning, 4 to 6 in the afternoon, are sacred. Interruptions during these periods are met with Arctic silence and withering glares that could freeze whiskey. But someone had rung the doorbell, which meant someone needed to answer it. I heard the immediate response before reaching the hallway, Caesar's low, authoritative growl that signaled a stranger on the stoop. The massive Doberman materialized from the front room where he'd been dozing in a patch of sunlight, moving with that deceptive speed 95 pounds of trained muscle achieves. Mars appeared from the kitchen corridor, taking his customary position on Caesar's left, black and rust coat gleaming, eyes alert, ready to back up his alpha's judgment. Apollo emerged from somewhere upstairs, lean and restless, positioning himself where he could monitor both the front entrance and the staircase leading to Wolfe's sanctuary. Through the one-way glass panel beside the front door, another security feature installed 3 years ago, along with the bulletproof glass in all the ground and second-floor windows, I could see a woman on the stoop. She was perhaps 35, expensively dressed in a charcoal suit and pearls, with auburn hair pulled into a French twist. Her face showed the kind of strain that comes from several sleepless nights, and her gloved hands clutched a leather handbag like it contained the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Before I could reach the door, Fritz Brenner appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. He glanced through the one-way glass, then at me, one eyebrow raised in silent question. "I'll handle it," I said. Fritz nodded and returned to his domain. The man runs our household like a Swiss watchmaker runs a chronometer. Everything precise, everyone properly vetted, no chaos tolerated. He'd personally overseen the installation of our security upgrades, from the bulletproof glass in the windows and the decorative mirror in the entrance hall to the reinforced steel core front door that could withstand everything short of a battering ram. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body in the gap. Caesar pressed against my leg, studying our visitor with those intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. Mars remained a few feet back, coiled and ready. Apollo watched from the staircase, ears pricked forward. "Yes?" The woman removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes red from crying. "I need to see Nero Wolfe. My name is Constance Holloway. My uncle is dead, and I believe he was murdered. The police think I'm hysterical. I was told Mr. Wolfe might listen. Mr. Wolfe doesn't see people without an appointment, and he's engaged until 11. Also, he doesn't work. If your uncle was murdered, the police are your best option." "The police think my uncle died of a heart attack in his own underground shelter. They won't investigate further because they think he was a paranoid lunatic who built a nuclear bunker and died alone inside it. But I know my uncle. He didn't have heart problems, and he didn't die of natural causes. Someone killed him." "Underground shelter? You mean like a bomb shelter?" "Not like a bomb shelter. The bomb shelter. 3 levels deep, reinforced concrete, air filtration, enough supplies to survive for 5 years. My uncle spent $2 million building a fortress beneath his Westchester estate because he was convinced nuclear war was imminent, and now he's dead inside it, and no one will listen when I say it's murder." That was interesting enough to warrant further attention. Caesar's growl had subsided to a low rumble of assessment. He'd decided this woman wasn't an immediate physical threat, but remained watchful. I glanced back at Mars and Apollo. Both were alert but not aggressive, which meant the pack had collectively judged her acceptable for now. "Wait here." I closed the door, the reinforced lock engaging with a satisfying click, and headed upstairs to commit the cardinal sin of interrupting Wolfe during plant room hours. The elevator would be faster, but using it before noon was like announcing my arrival with trumpets and cymbals. I took the stairs 2 at a time, passing Minerva on the second-floor landing. The strategist of our Doberman pack was conducting her morning patrol, and she fell into step behind me, curious about the disruption to routine. The humid warmth of the plant rooms enveloped me as I entered. Wolfe stood in the cool room examining a Miltenia with Theodore at his side, both men absorbed in discussion of some minute detail involving the orchid's petals. Diana, our smallest and swiftest Doberman, had positioned herself near the door to the moderate room. She often accompanied Wolfe upstairs, enjoying the warmth and watching over him from a discreet distance. Loyal, the brick-red pit bull who'd joined our household 8 months ago, was lying near Wolfe's feet. The dog's white chest blaze and notched ear gave him a rakish appearance, but those sharp eyes held pure devotion. The handmade leather collar Fritz had crafted for him, complete with brass plate engraved with our address, caught the greenhouse light. Archie. Wolfe's tone carried the weight of a judge pronouncing sentence. I am not to be disturbed. A woman named Constance Holloway is downstairs. Her uncle died inside his underground nuclear bunker under mysterious circumstances. The police say heart attack. She says murder. The uncle was apparently wealthy enough to build a 3-level fortress under his Westchester estate, and paranoid enough to actually do it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed fractionally. The only sign I'd caught his interest. A bomb shelter? A billionaire's bunker. $2 million worth of underground fortress designed to survive nuclear war, and somebody died inside it, under circumstances that smell wrong to the niece. The police have investigated? Briefly, they think the uncle was a paranoid crank who had a heart attack while playing survivalist. The niece thinks they're wrong. Wolfe was silent for 10 seconds, his lips pushing in and out, thinking mode. Loyal lifted his head, sensing deliberation. Theodore continued making notes in his cultivation log, pretending not to listen. Tell Miss Holloway, I will see her at 11:15, not before. Fritz will provide coffee if she wishes to wait. She'll wait. She looks desperate enough to camp on the stoop until Christmas if necessary. I headed back downstairs. Minerva and Diana followed, maintaining their patrol patterns. In the office, I could see through the bulletproof glass window that our visitor had descended to the sidewalk and was pacing, still clutching her handbag. I opened the door and called to her. Miss Holloway, Mr. Wolfe will see you at 11:15. You can wait inside if you'd like. Coffee? Relief flooded her face. Yes, thank you. Both the appointment and the coffee. I let her in. Caesar and Mars resumed their inspection, this time more thorough now that she was entering their territory. She froze, understanding instinctively that sudden movements around large dogs were inadvisable. Caesar circled her once, sniffing carefully. Cologne, anxiety, tobacco smoke from someone she'd been near recently. After his assessment, he looked at me and gave the slightest tail movement. Not quite approval, but acceptance that she could proceed for now. Impressive security, she said quietly, watching Caesar with wary respect. They're not decorative. They actually do the job. Follow me. I led her to the front room, the formal parlor we reserve for waiting clients. She settled into one of the upholstered chairs, finally releasing her death grip on the handbag. Fritz appeared moments later with coffee service on a silver tray. Real china, proper cream and sugar, everything elegant. The man takes hospitality seriously, even when his kitchen is in the middle of lunch preparations. Thank you, Miss Holloway said, accepting a cup. Her hands trembled slightly as she added cream. Fritz Brenner, I said by way of introduction. He runs the household. Fritz, this is Constance Holloway. She'll be meeting with Mr. Wolfe at 11:15. Fritz nodded politely and withdrew. Apollo had taken up position in the doorway between the front room and the hall, watching our visitor with that unblinking alertness that made clients nervous. I returned to my desk and resumed working through correspondence, keeping one eye on Miss Holloway through the open doorway. She didn't touch her coffee for several minutes. She sat rigidly, staring at nothing, occasionally checking the time on her delicate wristwatch. Whatever was weighing on her was heavy enough to crush appetite and courtesy. At precisely 11:03, I heard the elevator descending, Wolfe returning from the plant rooms. The timing was predictable as a railroad schedule. Caesar and Mars moved to their usual positions near the office door, waiting to greet him. Wolfe emerged, nodded to the dogs. They'd become integral to his routine within weeks of joining the household, and proceeded to his custom-built desk chair. The chair is reinforced to accommodate his 1/7 of a ton, and upholstered in leather that cost more than most people's cars. He settled with the slight grunt that always accompanied the action, then looked at me. Beer. I went to the kitchen where Fritz had already prepared a tray with 2 chilled bottles of Remmers and a glass. Wolfe's beer ritual is as fixed as sunrise. He opens the bottle with deliberate care, pours slowly to achieve the precise foam level, and drinks with the concentration some men reserve for prayer. Only after he'd set down his glass and achieved satisfaction did he speak. "Bring in Miss Holloway." I fetched our visitor. She entered the office clutching her handbag again, taking in the bookshelves, the safe in the corner, the globe, and the massive desk where Wolfe sat like a continental formation. Caesar had positioned himself near the door, Mars near the window overlooking the street, both dogs watching. Loyal had followed Wolfe down from the plant rooms and now resumed his position near Wolfe's desk, settling onto the floor with a soft exhalation. "Sit," I told Miss Holloway, indicating the red leather chair positioned to face Wolfe's desk. She sat, perching on the edge rather than settling back. Her hands remained clenched on her handbag. "Miss Holloway," Wolfe said without preamble, "Archie tells me your uncle died in an underground shelter he constructed for protection against nuclear attack, and you believe he was murdered. Explain the situation completely and precisely. Omit no relevant details." She took a breath, composing herself. "My uncle was Montgomery Holloway. He made his fortune in munitions during World War II, then invested in real estate and industrial manufacturing. He was worth approximately $40 million when he died 6 days ago." I let out a low whistle. $40 million was serious money, the kind that bought senators and skyscrapers. "Your uncle built a bomb shelter?" Wolfe asked. "Not a shelter, a bunker, an underground fortress. He started construction 2 years ago, convinced that nuclear war with the Soviet Union was inevitable. The bunker is located beneath his estate in Westchester, 3 levels deep, over 10,000 square feet of living space, completely self-contained, air filtration, water purification, electrical generators, food storage, medical supplies, communication equipment, everything needed to survive for years underground." "Impressive paranoia," I observed. "My uncle wasn't paranoid," she said sharply. "He was realistic. He'd seen what atomic bombs did in Japan. He understood Soviet capabilities. He believed we had perhaps 5 years before war broke out, and he intended to survive it. Building the bunker wasn't madness. It was preparation." "Who knew about this bunker?" Wolfe asked. "Family, household staff, the construction crew that built it, and a few close business associates. Uncle Montgomery was secretive about it. He didn't want publicity or government attention. The estate is gated and isolated. The bunker entrance is concealed inside the main house's wine cellar." "Tell me about his death." 6 days ago, Wednesday morning, the housekeeper found him dead inside the bunker. He was in the main living area on the 2nd level, slumped in a chair. The doctor who examined him said heart attack. The police agreed. Everyone agreed. Case closed." "You disagreed?" "Uncle Montgomery had a complete physical examination 3 months ago. His heart was fine, blood pressure normal, cholesterol acceptable, no cardiac issues. His doctor had told him he'd live to 90. Now I'm supposed to believe he dropped dead at 63 from a heart attack no one saw coming." "Medical surprises occur," Wolfe said. "Hearts fail unexpectedly. Why do you suspect murder?" "Because of what was in his hand." That got Wolfe's attention. His eyes opened fully. Always a sign of interest. "Explain." "When the housekeeper found him, Uncle Montgomery was holding something. A small key. Not a regular door key, but something older, more ornate. The police catalogued it as personal property and returned it with his effects. No one thought it was significant." "But you do." "I do because I'd never seen that key before. I lived with Uncle Montgomery on and off for 15 years after my parents died. I knew every corner of that estate, every drawer and cabinet. That key appeared from nowhere, and Uncle Montgomery was clutching it when he died. That means it mattered." "Have you attempted to determine what the key opens?" "Yes. I've tried every lock in the house and the bunker. It doesn't fit anything. Which means either it opens something I haven't found, or it's from somewhere else entirely. Do you have this key with you?" She opened her handbag and removed a small velvet pouch. From it she withdrew a brass key about 3 inches long, ornately decorated with Victorian-era scrollwork. She handed it to Wolfe. He examined it carefully, turning it to catch the light. Old, 19th century, possibly earlier, hand-forged, not machine-made. The wear pattern suggests it's been used regularly for decades. This key has opened something many times. Notice the smoothness here, where it would engage the lock mechanism. He handed it to me. I studied it carefully. The key was beautiful in its craftsmanship, but Wolfe was right. The working surfaces showed significant wear from repeated use. This wasn't a decorative piece someone kept in a drawer. This was functional. Miss Holloway, Wolfe said, beyond this mysterious key, what other evidence suggests murder rather than natural death? The bunker was sealed when Uncle Montgomery was found. The entrance door was locked from the inside, a mechanical combination lock that only he knew. The housekeeper had to call a locksmith to break in. If someone killed him, how did they get inside a sealed bunker and then lock it behind them when they left? A locked room mystery, I said. The classic impossible crime. Precisely, Miss Holloway said. The police used that impossibility to dismiss murder entirely. They said no one could have entered or exited. Therefore, natural death was the only explanation. But I know my uncle. He was healthy, careful, prepared for everything. He didn't just drop dead clutching a mysterious key for no reason. Wolfe drank more beer, his expression thoughtful. Caesar had settled onto the floor near the door, but his eyes remained on Miss Holloway, monitoring, always monitoring. Mars maintained his position by the window. Loyal's chin rested on his paws, but his ears were pricked forward, listening. Who inherits your uncle's wealth? Wolfe asked. Wolfe asked. I do. He left everything to me. The estate, the business holdings, all 40 million. His will was updated 6 months ago. Do you need that money, Miss Holloway? She met his gaze steadily. I'm not wealthy, Mr. Wolfe, but I'm not desperate. I work as a curator at the Metropolitan Museum. I earn a decent salary and live comfortably. My uncle's money will change my life, certainly, but I didn't kill him for it. And before you ask, I have an alibi. I was at the museum Wednesday morning when he died. 30 people can verify I was nowhere near Westchester. Other family members? None. Uncle Montgomery was an only child. Never married, no children. I'm his only living relative. The estate was his entire life, that and preparing for nuclear war. Business associates who might benefit from his death. Uncle Montgomery had largely withdrawn from active business management over the past 2 years. He'd become obsessed with the bunker, with survivalism, with preparation. His business partners were relieved when he stepped back. His behavior had become erratic and embarrassing, but none of them gained financially from his death. I inherit everything. Wolfe was silent for 30 seconds, lips pushing in and out. Finally he spoke. My fee for investigating murder is $25,000 plus expenses. If I prove your uncle was murdered and identify the killer, you pay the fee. If I determine his death was natural, you pay only expenses. If I fail to reach a conclusion, you pay half the fee plus expenses. Are these terms acceptable? Yes. I'll pay whatever it takes. Uncle Montgomery deserves justice, and I deserve to know the truth. Very well. I'll require complete access to the estate, the bunker, all business and personal records, and authority to question anyone involved. Archie will begin investigating immediately. I'll direct his efforts from here. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. She opened her handbag and withdrew a heavy ring of keys and a folded document. These are keys to the estate. This document grants you legal access as my representative. The estate staff have been instructed to cooperate fully. Excellent. One final question. You said the bunker entrance is concealed in the wine cellar. How many people knew the combination to the entrance lock? As far as I know, only Uncle Montgomery. He was secretive about security. Even the construction crew didn't know the final combination. Uncle Montgomery changed it after they completed work. Then how did the housekeeper summon a locksmith? She called me. I authorized bringing in a safe specialist from the city. It took him 6 hours to crack the lock without destroying it. And the bunker has remained sealed since your uncle's death? Partially. The police examined it briefly, found nothing suspicious, and left. I had the lock repaired and set a new combination. No one has entered since. Good. Archie will need access this afternoon. Provide him with the new combination and any documentation regarding the bunker's construction. Blueprints, contractor records, specifications, everything. She nodded and wrote information on a slip of paper from her handbag, handing it to me. The combination and my direct telephone number. Call before coming. I'll meet you at the estate. It's about an hour north of the city. I walked her to the door. Caesar and Mars escorted us, their customary security protocol for departing visitors. After she disappeared around the corner, I locked the reinforced door and returned to the office. Wolfe had opened his second bottle of beer and was staring at the Victorian key on his desk blotter. Loyal had raised his head, watching Wolfe with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand when something important was happening. "So," I said, settling at my desk, "paranoid billionaire builds underground fortress, dies inside it, under mysterious circumstances, and leaves behind a key that opens nothing we know about. Interesting start to a Friday. A locked room murder in an underground bunker designed to be impenetrable. Intellectually stimulating. Assuming it's actually murder, and not just a heart attack plus coincidental key. The key is not coincidental. Montgomery Holloway was clutching it when he died, which means it was important to him in his final moments. Either he was trying to use it, trying to hide it, or trying to communicate something about it. Determine what that key opens, and we'll understand why he died. Could be a safety deposit box key, a lockbox, a private cabinet somewhere. Then why was he holding it in an underground bunker? If the key opens something off-site, what purpose did it serve in his final moments? No, Archie. That key opens something connected to the bunker itself. Something hidden, something secret, something worth dying for, or killing for. A hidden room. Another level below the three everyone knows about. Possibly. Or a vault, a safe, a sealed chamber containing something valuable enough to murder for. The bunker itself is a fortress. What does one hide inside a fortress? Something more precious than mere survival supplies. I made notes, so I visit the estate this afternoon, examine the bunker, look for hidden compartments or additional rooms, and determine what our Victorian key opens. And interview everyone with access to the estate. Household staff, business associates, construction crew if you can locate them. Someone knew Montgomery Holloway well enough to understand his routines, his security measures, his vulnerabilities. Someone had both motive and means to kill him inside his own fortress. The locked room problem remains. How does someone murder a man inside a sealed bunker and then lock it from the inside when they leave? That, Wolfe said with satisfaction, is precisely why this case is worth taking. The impossible interests me far more than the merely difficult. The telephone rang. I answered, Nero Wolfe's office. Goodwin, Kramer. Put Wolfe on. I covered the mouthpiece. Inspector Kramer wants to talk to you. Wolfe's expression showed his usual distaste for the telephone. He picked up his desk extension with visible reluctance. Yes, Mr. Kramer? I listened on my line. Kramer's voice was tight with irritation. Wolfe, I just got a call from Constance Holloway's lawyer. She's hired you to investigate Montgomery Holloway's death. I'm calling to tell you there's nothing to investigate. The man died of a heart attack in his own bomb shelter. Natural causes, case closed. Yet Miss Holloway believes otherwise, and she's entitled to private investigation of her concerns. She's entitled to waste her money if she wants, but you're going to be wasting your time. I had 2 detectives examine that bunker. They found nothing suspicious. The medical examiner confirmed heart attack. Montgomery Holloway was a 63-year-old eccentric who built a nuclear fortress and died alone inside it. That's not murder. That's Darwin in action. Nevertheless, I've accepted the commission. If I discover evidence of murder, I'll inform you. If I confirm natural death, Miss Holloway will have peace of mind. Either way, I'm conducting an investigation. You're going to stick your nose into a closed case and create problems where none exist. I'm going to examine evidence objectively, which apparently your department failed to do. Heart attacks don't typically involve mysterious keys clutched in the victim's hand, Mr. Kramer. What key? The ornate brass key Montgomery Holloway was holding when he died. The key your detectives catalogued and returned without investigating its significance. The key that opened something important enough that a dying man held onto it. Silence on Kramer's end. Then, nobody told me about a key. Then your detectives were incompetent or inattentive. Either way, the key exists, and its presence suggests there's more to this death than cardiac failure. Good day, Mr. Kramer. Wolfe hung up without waiting for response. I replaced my receiver and grinned. That was cruel. You just made Kramer realize his detectives missed something important. Good. Perhaps he'll be more thorough in future investigations. Now go, Archie. Visit the estate, examine the bunker, and bring me information. I'll analyze what you find, and determine how an impossible murder was committed inside an impenetrable fortress. I grabbed my coat and hat, collected the estate keys and Constance Holloway's note with the bunker combination, and headed for the door. Caesar and Mars escorted me to the entrance, their standard protocol when household members departed on business. I gave both dogs quick scratches behind the ears before stepping out into the autumn sunshine. A billionaire's bunker, a locked room mystery, a Victorian key that opened nothing we knew about. And somewhere in Westchester, either a man had died of natural causes while clutching a meaningless antique, or someone had committed the perfect murder inside an underground fortress designed to be impenetrable. I caught a taxi uptown to rent a car. The estate was an hour north, and I'd need transportation. While I drove, I'd think about locked rooms, hidden chambers, and what kind of secret was worth $2 million worth of concrete and paranoia to protect. By the time I returned to West 35th Street, I'd have answers, or at least better questions. The game was afoot, as somebody famous once said. And this time, the game was underground. The drive to Westchester took 55 minutes through autumn countryside that looked like a postcard. I'd rented a '54 Chevrolet from a garage on 11th Avenue, dark green, anonymous, comfortable enough for highway driving. The address Constance Holloway had provided led me to a gated estate about 3 miles outside Mount Kisco, hidden behind stone walls and iron gates that looked like they'd been transplanted from a Gothic novel. I pressed the buzzer at the gate. A crackling voice came through the intercom. Ancient technology, but functional. Yes? Archie Goodwin. Miss Holloway is expecting me. The gate swung open with a metallic groan. I drove up a curved driveway lined with oak trees, their leaves brilliant orange and red in the afternoon sun. The main house emerged from the foliage, a sprawling Georgian mansion, 3 stories of red brick and white columns, easily 20 rooms, the kind of place that required a staff of 10 just to keep the dust at bay. Constance Holloway stood on the front steps, having traded her city suit for practical slacks and a cardigan. She looked less strained than she had at the brownstone, possibly because she was on familiar territory. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for coming so quickly. I've prepared everything you'll need. Blueprints, contractor records, and I've instructed the staff to answer any questions." "How many staff?" 3 full-time. Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper who found Uncle Montgomery. She's been with the family for 30 years. Thomas Garrick, the groundskeeper and general handyman, 20 years. And Patrick Dunn, who manages the mechanical systems, including the bunker's equipment. He's been here 5 years. All 3 knew about the bunker? Yes. Uncle Montgomery needed people he could trust to maintain it. They all signed confidentiality agreements and were paid extremely well for their discretion. She led me inside. The entrance hall was impressive. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, oil paintings of stern ancestors who looked like they'd never smiled in their lives. We passed through to a study lined with mahogany bookcases, then through a concealed door that opened onto stairs descending into darkness. "The wine cellar," Constance explained, switching on lights. "The bunker entrance is hidden behind the wine racks." We descended stone steps into a cool underground room lined with bottles, hundreds of them, carefully organized by vintage and region. Constance approached the far wall where a massive wooden rack held bottles of what looked like expensive Burgundy. She pressed something I couldn't see, and the entire rack swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a steel door set into concrete. "The entrance," she said. "The lock is a mechanical combination. No electricity required, no keys to lose. Uncle Montgomery designed it that way deliberately. He didn't trust electronic systems. Smart, considering the setting. Electronics fail. Mechanical systems just need maintenance." She stepped up to the lock, a large dial like a bank vault, with numbers from 0 to 99. She shielded her movements from me while working the combination, which was prudent. After 3 rotations and several stops at specific numbers, something inside the door clanked heavily. She gripped a large wheel handle and turned it counterclockwise. The steel door, which must have weighed 300 pounds, swung open smoothly on well-oiled hinges. Beyond was darkness and a faint mechanical hum. "The ventilation system runs continuously," Constance said, reaching inside to flip switches. Lights came on, revealing a concrete tunnel sloping downward. "The bunker has its own power. Diesel generators with enough fuel for 10 years. Air filtration operates 24 hours a day." Uncle Montgomery wanted it ready at all times in case nuclear attack came without warning. We entered. The steel door closed behind us, with a sound like a bank vault ceiling. Constance spun the interior wheel handle, engaging locks. The door locks from both sides. Same combination. Uncle Montgomery insisted on that. He wanted to be able to seal himself in completely, which creates our locked room problem. If someone killed him and left, how did they lock the door from the inside? Exactly. The tunnel descended at a gentle grade, walls reinforced concrete, floor polished to prevent slipping. Ventilation ducts ran along the ceiling, and electrical conduits provided lighting every 10 feet. After about 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a large room. I stopped and stared. The space was extraordinary, easily 40 feet across, ceiling 12 feet high, furnished like an upscale apartment. Leather sofas, mahogany tables, oriental rugs, bookshelves crammed with volumes, a desk with typewriter, filing cabinets, even artwork on the walls. Track lighting provided warm illumination, and the air smelled fresh despite being underground. "This is the first level," Constance said. "Living quarters, library, recreation area." Uncle Montgomery spent considerable time down here, testing systems and stocking supplies. I walked the perimeter, examining everything. The construction was first-rate, no visible seams in the concrete, no water damage, no sense of being in a cave. This could have been a basement rec room in any wealthy home, except for the complete absence of windows, and the knowledge that we were buried under tons of earth. "Second level?" I asked. "This way." She led me to a spiral staircase in the corner, steel construction, solid as a bridge. We descended to the second level, which was laid out differently, more utilitarian. I saw a kitchen with stainless steel appliances, storage rooms with metal shelving holding canned goods and dried foods, a medical station with supplies that could stock a small hospital, and a communications room with radio equipment. And in what appeared to be a sitting area near the communications room, I saw where Montgomery Holloway had died. The space was cordoned off with what looked like police tape, though it had been removed and carelessly reapplied. A leather armchair faced a wall of maps, world maps, US maps, maps showing Soviet military installations, maps with notations about fallout patterns and radiation zones. A side table held an empty glass and a book, On Thermonuclear War by Herman Kahn, bookmark protruding from the middle. "Uncle Montgomery was found in that chair," Constance said quietly, slumped forward, the key in his right hand. The glass contained whiskey, his nightly ritual, the book he'd been reading. The police took photographs, examined everything, found nothing suspicious. I studied the chair carefully, without touching anything. The leather was expensive, well worn, shaped by years of use. Montgomery Holloway had sat here often, reading about nuclear war and planning survival. No signs of struggle? No defensive wounds? None. The medical examiner said he appeared to have died peacefully, if a heart attack can be called peaceful. No trauma, no indication of violence. And the key was in his right hand. "Yes, clutched," the housekeeper said, not just resting there, but gripped tightly, as if he'd been holding it when the attack hit. I examined the maps on the wall. They were marked extensively in red ink, circles around cities, calculations of blast radii, notes about prevailing winds and fallout patterns. Montgomery Holloway had studied nuclear war with the intensity of a military strategist. "Your uncle was serious about this," I said. "Obsessively so. For the last 2 years, it consumed him. He read everything about atomic weapons, civil defense, radiation effects. He consulted with former military officials and nuclear scientists. He believed war was coming, and he intended to be ready. Was he afraid? Paranoid in a clinical sense?" She considered. "Afraid, yes, but not irrationally so. He'd seen photographs from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He understood Soviet capabilities. He looked at the world, Korea, the arms race, McCarthy's hearings, civil defense drills, and concluded that nuclear war was probable within 5 to 10 years. Building this bunker was his logical response to that probability. Logical if you have $2 million to spend on concrete and paranoia. He preferred to call it preparation. He used to say, "The difference between paranoia and prudence is whether the threat is real. The Soviet Union has atomic bombs aimed at us. That makes my bunker prudent, not paranoid." I moved to the communications room. The radio equipment was impressive. Shortwave receivers, transmitters, enough gear to communicate around the world if necessary. Everything was labeled, organized, maintained. Montgomery Holloway had been methodical in his preparations. Third level? I asked. Mechanical systems, generators, water purification, air filtration, storage tanks. Not much to see except equipment. Uncle Montgomery rarely went down there. Patrick Dunn handled all maintenance. I'd like to see it anyway. We descended another spiral staircase to the third level. The temperature dropped noticeably. This level was functional rather than comfortable. I saw massive diesel generators, water tanks holding thousands of gallons, air filtration systems with filters the size of automobiles, electrical panels with enough switches to operate a small factory. How long could someone survive down here with all this? I asked. Uncle Montgomery calculated 5 years minimum if fully stocked. The food storage can feed 6 people for that duration. Water recycling could support 8. Air filtration has redundant systems in case of failures. The generators have fuel for 10 years of continuous operation. 6 to 8 people. Your uncle planned to bring others. He had a list: family, trusted friends, essential personnel. He never showed it to me, but he mentioned it once. He said when war came, he'd gather his chosen few and seal the doors. Everyone else would be on their own. Grim way to think about survival. Realistic, he'd say. You can't save everyone in a nuclear war. You save who you can and accept that millions will die. Uncle Montgomery had made his peace with that arithmetic. I examined the generators, the control panels, the maze of pipes and valves. Everything was clean, well-maintained, professional. Patrick Dunn knew his job. Show me how someone exits and locks the door from inside, I said. We returned to the first level and approached the entrance tunnel. Constance demonstrated the interior wheel handle, showing how it engaged the same locking mechanism as the exterior. You spin the wheel counterclockwise to unlock, clockwise to lock. The combination is the same from both sides. 3 rotations with specific stops. Once locked, the door cannot be opened without knowing the combination, not without cutting equipment that would take hours. So if your uncle died down here alone, and the door was locked from inside, we have 3 possibilities. 1. He locked himself in and died of natural causes while holding a mysterious key. 2. Someone was with him, killed him, and somehow locked the door from outside after leaving, which requires knowing the combination. 3. Someone killed him, stayed inside long enough to be discovered, and pretended to have just arrived. Mrs. Brennan found him. She called the police from the house. She couldn't have killed him. She's 70 years old and weighs about 90 pounds. Could she have been accomplice to someone else? Constance shook her head firmly. Mrs. Brennan loved Uncle Montgomery. She's been with the family since I was a child. I'd stake my life on her innocence. Then we're back to the locked room problem. Someone killed him and locked the door from outside, which requires the combination. Who besides your uncle knew it? No one, as far as I know. He was obsessive about security. Someone knew it. Someone either learned it from him, figured it out, or forced him to reveal it. The lock itself wasn't damaged when the safe specialist opened it. No. He cracked it by feel and sound, traditional safe-cracking techniques. The mechanism was intact. I walked the bunker for another hour, examining every room, every corridor, every piece of equipment. I was looking for hidden doors, concealed chambers, any space where someone could have hidden or accessed the bunker without using the main entrance. I found nothing. The bunker was exactly what it appeared to be, a sealed, self-contained fortress, with one entrance and no other obvious access points. We returned to the surface. In the study, Constance had assembled documents for me. Blueprints showing the bunker's complete layout, contractor records, supply inventories, maintenance logs. I collected everything, along with the list of staff I needed to interview. One more thing, I said. The construction crew that built this bunker, who were they?
Talbot Engineering. They specialize in underground construction, subway tunnels, building foundations, that sort of work. Uncle Montgomery hired them specifically because they had experience with complex underground projects and could maintain confidentiality.
I'll need their contact information. It's in the contractor file. They completed the work 18 months ago. Uncle Montgomery was satisfied with their professionalism. I thanked her and drove back to Manhattan with a trunk full of documents and a head full of questions. The locked room problem bothered me most, not because it was impossible, but because the solution would reveal how the killer had thought about the problem. Impossible crimes aren't impossible, they're just cleverly staged. The trick is understanding the staging. I arrived at the brownstone at 6:15 p.m., just as Wolfe would be descending from his afternoon plant room session. Fritz met me at the door, and Caesar and Mars appeared to conduct their inspection. I must have brought back sense from the bunker. Caesar spent extra time sniffing my shoes and trouser cuffs, analyzing the underground odors. Wolfe was in the office, freshly installed behind his desk with his evening's first beer. Loyal had resumed his position near the desk, and Minerva had positioned herself near the bookshelves. I dropped the bundle of documents on my desk and settled into my chair. "Report," Wolfe said. I gave him everything: the layout of the bunker, the locked room mechanics, the discovery of Montgomery Holloway's body, the mysterious key that opened nothing I could find, and my observations about the staff and construction. Wolfe listened without interruption, eyes half closed, occasionally drinking beer. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute. "The bunker has no other access points, no ventilation shafts large enough for human passage, no emergency exits, none that I could find. The ventilation shafts are 8 inches in diameter. No one's getting through those. The emergency exit is a steel ladder shaft that leads to a concealed hatch in the woods, but it's locked from inside with a bar mechanism. No way to lock it from outside." The construction crew. How many people worked on the project? According to the records, 12 foremen, engineers, laborers. They worked for 8 months, completed in February of last year. Montgomery Holloway paid them extremely well and required confidentiality agreements. 12 people knew the bunker's complete layout, its security system, its vulnerabilities. Any of them could have planned an entry method the architect never anticipated. True, but they didn't know the door combination. Holloway changed it after construction was complete. Nevertheless, interview them. Construction workers see things architects miss. One of them may have noticed a design flaw or access point that could be exploited. What about the key? I tried it on every lock in the bunker. Doors, cabinets, storage lockers, file boxes. It doesn't fit anything. Because the key doesn't open anything in the bunker. It opens something else, something related to why Montgomery Holloway was killed. The key is evidence, Archie. Not a tool the killer used, but a clue the victim tried to preserve. You think Holloway knew he was dying and grabbed the key deliberately, to point us toward something? I think he was murdered, realized it in his final moments, and held on to the one thing that would explain why. Find what that key opens, and we'll understand the motive. Understand the motive, and we'll identify the killer. Fritz appeared in the doorway. "Dinner in 20 minutes. Roast duck, wild rice, braised celery, and apple tart." Wolfe's face showed satisfaction. "Excellent. Archie, tomorrow you'll interview the construction crew and household staff. I'll examine these blueprints and determine how someone achieved the impossible. There's always an explanation for apparent impossibilities. We simply need to see it." Over dinner, which was as superb as Fritz's meals always were, Wolfe discoursed on the psychology of survivalism. He found it fascinating that humans would spend millions building underground fortresses while ignoring the philosophical question of whether surviving nuclear war was actually desirable. Survival for what purpose? He mused over duck. To emerge into a radioactive wasteland, civilization destroyed, resources exhausted, society collapsed. Montgomery Holloway spent $2 million ensuring he could survive 5 years underground, but apparently never asked whether that survival would have meaning. A peculiar blind spot in an otherwise intelligent man. Maybe he figured surviving was enough. Deal with meaning later. Perhaps, but I suspect his bunker represented something deeper than practical preparation. It was a fortress against uncertainty, a concrete manifestation of control in a world that felt increasingly uncontrollable. The Cold War creates existential anxiety. Holloway responded by building a physical solution to a philosophical problem. And someone killed him in his own fortress. Poetic, in a grim way. Indeed, the man who built a fortress to protect against external threats was killed by an internal one. A classic tragic irony. After dinner, I spent 2 hours typing up my report, while Wolfe studied the bunker blueprints, occasionally making notes. The dogs had settled into their evening patterns, Caesar and Mars downstairs, Apollo roaming the upper floors, Diana and Minerva alternating patrols. loyal, maintaining his vigil near Wolfe. At 10 o'clock, Saul Panzer called to report on another case we had running. Routine surveillance, nothing urgent. I filled him in on the bunker investigation, and he whistled appreciatively. Locked room murder in an underground fortress. Wolfe must be loving this. He's intrigued, which means he'll solve it, probably in some brilliant way that makes the rest of us feel stupid for missing the obvious. That's why he gets the big fee. You doing okay after being underground all afternoon? Some people find that claustrophobic. It was strange. All that concrete above your head, no natural light, the constant mechanical hum. But the bunker itself was impressive, comfortable, well-designed, fully stocked. If nuclear war actually comes, Montgomery Holloway's heirs will have the last laugh. If nuclear war comes, I don't think anyone will be laughing. Good point. I hung up and continued typing. Wolfe had spread the blueprints across his desk, using a magnifying glass to examine details. Whatever he was seeing, he wasn't sharing yet. Typical. He'd process everything internally, let his subconscious work on the problem, and eventually announce his solution with the satisfaction of a magician revealing a trick. At 11, I went up to bed. Tomorrow would be busy. Interviews with construction workers and household staff, trying to find someone who knew something useful about a locked room murder in an underground fortress. Somewhere in Westchester, Montgomery Holloway's bunker sat sealed and dark, holding secrets about how a man died in what should have been an impenetrable sanctuary. And somewhere in Manhattan, a killer thought they'd committed the perfect crime. They were wrong, because Nero Wolfe never let impossibilities remain impossible for long. Saturday morning arrived with rain, cold, steady, miserable November rain that made staying in bed feel like a moral virtue. I forced myself up at 8, dressed, and went down to breakfast. Wolfe was already in the dining room, working through shirred eggs and sausages with the focused attention he brought to all of Fritz's cooking. "Good morning," I said, helping myself to scrambled eggs and bacon. "Satisfactory. I've examined the bunker blueprints thoroughly. The fortress has one architectural flaw, though it may not be relevant to the murder. Which is? The ventilation system. The air intakes are on the surface, concealed in the woods surrounding the estate. They're protected by steel grills and filters, but theoretically someone with sufficient time and equipment could access the ventilation shafts from above. The shafts are 8 inches in diameter. No one's climbing through those. No, but someone could lower objects through them. Tools, weapons, perhaps even poison gas, if they were sufficiently homicidal. The shafts descend approximately 40 feet before connecting to the main filtration system on the 3rd level. Montgomery Holloway's body showed no signs of poisoning or trauma beyond heart failure, which is why I said the flaw may not be relevant. But it's worth noting, someone planning murder in that bunker had more options than simply entering through the front door. After breakfast, I called Talbot Engineering and arranged to meet their foreman at their office in Long Island City. The company occupied a converted warehouse near the waterfront, surrounded by construction equipment and building materials. The secretary directed me to a cramped office where I found Dennis Talbot himself, late 50s, weathered face, hands scarred from decades of physical labor. "Mr. Goodwin, you're investigating Montgomery Holloway's death? Terrible business. I heard it was a heart attack." "That's what the police say. Mr. Holloway's niece isn't convinced. I'm following up on some questions about the bunker construction." Talbot gestured to a chair that looked like it had been salvaged from a demolition site. "Ask away, though I don't know what I can tell you that would matter. We finished that job 18 months ago. Tell me about the project. How did Montgomery Holloway approach you?" "He called in spring of '53, said he wanted an underground shelter built on his Westchester property. Nuclear bomb shelter, completely sealed, self-sufficient for long-term occupation. He had drawings already, architectural plans, engineering specifications, the whole package. He just needed a crew to build it." "How long did construction take?" 8 months. Started in June '53, finished in February 50. It was complex work, digging that deep without disturbing the main house, pouring reinforced concrete, installing all the mechanical systems. But Mr. Holloway paid well, and we delivered on schedule." "How many people worked on the project?" "Full crew of 12. I supervised, had 2 structural engineers, 3 equipment specialists for the mechanical systems, and 6 laborers for the heavy work." "Did any of them continue contact with Montgomery Holloway After construction was completed? Not that I know of. Mr. Holloway was satisfied with our work, paid the final invoice, and that was it. He was particular about confidentiality, made everyone sign non-disclosure agreements. He didn't want publicity about his bunker. Did anyone on your crew notice anything unusual during construction? Any concerns about the design? Talbot thought for a moment. The main entrance was tricky. That combination lock and steel door. Mr. Holloway insisted on installing it himself after we'd finished the rest. Wouldn't let any of us touch it. Said he didn't want anyone knowing the combination. Smart, given what he was protecting. Maybe. But it also meant if something went wrong with that lock, only he could fix it. My engineer, Joseph Brenner, good man, told Mr. Holloway he should have a backup key system in case the combination mechanism failed. Mr. Holloway refused. Said keys could be stolen or copied. I filed that away. This Joseph Brenner, where can I find him? Still works for me. He's supervising a foundation project in Queens today. I can give you the address. Please. Anyone else on the crew who might remember useful details? Patrick Dunn. He installed the mechanical systems. Mr. Holloway liked his work so much, he hired him full-time to maintain the bunker. Patrick's been at the estate ever since. I'd meet Patrick Dunn at the estate. One more question. During construction, did you notice any additional work being done? Secret rooms, hidden chambers, anything not on the official plans? Talbot shook his head. Nothing like that. What we built matched the drawings exactly. Mr. Holloway was obsessive about following specifications. If he'd wanted secret additions, he would have hired a separate crew and kept us out of it. But theoretically, someone from your crew could have installed something without your knowledge. Theoretically, sure. But I was on site daily, and I knew every inch of that project. If anyone had been doing unauthorized work, I'd have noticed. I thanked him and collected Joseph Brenner's address. The foundation project was in Flushing, about a 40-minute drive through rain and Saturday traffic. I found Brenner at a muddy construction site, yelling at a crane operator about proper load distribution. He was perhaps 40, built like a wrestler, with the patient competence of someone who'd spent his life making sure buildings didn't fall down. Mr. Brenner? Archie Goodwin. I'm investigating Montgomery Holloway's death. Your boss said you might remember some details about the bunker construction. He looked at me warily. I heard Mr. Holloway died of a heart attack. What's to investigate? His niece has questions. I'm following up. Can you spare a few minutes? Coffee first. I'm freezing. We found a diner 2 blocks away. Over terrible coffee and surprisingly good pie, Brenner told me about the bunker project. His account matched Talbot's 8 months of complex underground construction. Montgomery Holloway, paying well but demanding absolute confidentiality. The man was paranoid, Brenner said. Not in a crazy way, but in a careful, calculated way. He didn't trust anyone completely. He checked our work constantly, questioned every decision, demanded documentation for everything. He installed the entrance lock himself. Yeah, wouldn't let any of us near it. I warned him about that. What if the mechanism failed and he got trapped inside? He said he'd deal with that risk rather than risk someone knowing his combination. What about the ventilation system? Any concerns there? The ventilation was solid. We installed commercial-grade filtration, nuclear, biological, chemical protection. The air intakes are on the surface, hidden in the woods. Steel grills, locked covers, the whole system designed to be tamper-proof. But theoretically, someone could access those intakes from above. Brenner considered, with time and equipment maybe, you'd need to cut through steel grills, bypass filters, lower something down 40-foot shafts. Possible, but difficult. Why would someone bother when there's a front door? Because the front door has a combination lock only Montgomery Holloway knew. The ventilation shafts don't. True, but what would you accomplish by accessing the ventilation? You can't climb through, the shafts are too narrow. You could lower objects, I suppose, but what good does that do? Depends on the object. Poison gas, for instance. Brenner set down his coffee cup. You think someone gassed Mr. Holloway through the ventilation system? I don't think anything yet. I'm exploring possibilities. Well, the filtration system would neutralize most gases. That's its entire purpose, to protect against chemical and biological attacks. You'd need something specifically designed to bypass those filters, and even then, you'd need to deliver enough quantity to affect someone 40 feet underground in a large space. It's not practical. But possible? Barely. And it would require knowledge of the filtration system specifications, access to specialized chemicals, and significant technical expertise. You're describing a very sophisticated operation. Montgomery Holloway built a $2 million underground fortress. Someone murdered him inside it. I think sophistication is a given. Brenner ate pie and thought, if someone killed Mr. Holloway, it wasn't through the ventilation, too complex, too uncertain. They'd have used a simpler method, such as gaining his trust, getting invited inside, killing him when he wasn't expecting it. The locked room problem is real, but every locked room has a key, sometimes literal, sometimes figurative. Find the key, you solve the murder. I paid for coffee and pie, thanked Brenner for his time, and drove back to Manhattan. It was nearly 3 o'clock when I arrived at the brownstone, soaked from the rain and frustrated by lack of progress. Caesar and Mars greeted me at the door with their usual inspection, then allowed me to pass. Loyal appeared from the office, tail wagging slightly. He developed a particular fondness for me and always seemed glad when I returned from field work. Wolfe was in the office, surrounded by the bunker blueprints. He'd spread them across his desk, the floor, even on top of the filing cabinets. His beer bottles sat empty on his desk. He'd been working through the afternoon instead of attending to his orchids, which meant something had caught his interest. "Learn anything?" he asked without looking up. I reported my conversations with Talbot and Brenner, emphasizing the ventilation system vulnerability and Brenner's skepticism about its use for murder. Wolfe listened while continuing to study the blueprints. "Brenner is correct," he said when I finished. "The ventilation system is theoretically vulnerable but practically useless for committing murder. Too many variables, too much uncertainty. The killer used a simpler method, which is not yet determined, but I'm close. The blueprints reveal something interesting about the bunker's construction, something neither the architects nor the construction crew fully understood. Care to share?" "Not until I've verified my theory. Tomorrow you'll visit the estate again and conduct specific tests inside the bunker. I'll provide detailed instructions. For now, interview the household staff. Someone at that estate knows more than they've revealed." The telephone rang. I answered. Nero Wolfe's office. "Mr. Goodwin? This is Constance Holloway. Something's happened at the estate. Someone broke into the bunker last night." I covered the mouthpiece. Constance Holloway. Someone broke into the bunker. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. "Put her on speaker." I did. "Miss Holloway, you're on with both of us. Tell us exactly what happened." Her voice came through tinny but clear. "I was at the estate this morning and decided to check the bunker. When I opened the entrance door, I found things disturbed. Drawers opened, files scattered. Clearly someone had been searching for something. But here's the strange part. The entrance door was still locked with the combination. No signs of forced entry, no damage to the lock mechanism. Whoever broke in knew the combination." "Could you have forgotten to lock it after Mr. Goodwin's visit yesterday?" Wolfe asked. "No. I locked it myself and tested it. Someone opened that door, searched the bunker, and locked it behind them when they left. Just like whoever killed Uncle Montgomery." "Has anything been stolen?" "I don't know yet. The bunker contains so much documents, supplies, equipment. I'm conducting an inventory now. But someone was definitely inside, searching for something specific." "Don't touch anything further," Wolfe said. "Archie will arrive within the hour to examine the scene. In the meantime, change the combination again and tell no one, not even the household staff, the new code." "I will, Mr. Wolfe. This proves Uncle Montgomery was murdered, doesn't it? Someone needed something from that bunker badly enough to break in after his death. It proves someone is searching for something. Whether that relates to your uncle's death remains to be determined. Archie will call you shortly." She hung up. I looked at Wolfe. "Back to Westchester. At least the rain stopped. Take Saul with you. If someone is willing to break into that bunker once, they may attempt it again. I want you protected and witnessed." I called Saul, who agreed to meet me at the estate. Then I grabbed my coat and headed out. Caesar and Mars escorted me to the door, and I gave them both attention before leaving. Outside, the rain had indeed stopped, but the November cold had intensified. As I drove north through gathering darkness, I thought about locked rooms and combination locks, and someone desperate enough to risk breaking into an underground fortress even after committing murder there. Whatever was hidden in that bunker, It was worth killing for, and worth returning for, even at great risk. The question was, what? I picked up Saul Panzer at his apartment on East 38th Street. He emerged wearing a heavy coat and carrying a leather satchel that probably contained tools of his investigative trade: lockpicks, cameras, evidence bags, whatever else a professional operative needed for examining crime scenes. "Interesting case," Saul said as we headed north. "Locked room murder in a nuclear bunker. Very Nero." "Very impossible, you mean? Except impossible crimes aren't impossible. They're just staged cleverly." "And Wolfe's figured out the staging?" "He says he's close, which means he'll have some brilliant insight that makes the rest of us feel stupid for missing it." The drive took an hour in light Saturday evening traffic. We arrived at the estate at 5:45 p.m., twilight fading to darkness. Constance Holloway met us at the main house, looking worried. "Thank you for coming, both of you. I've completed a preliminary inventory. Nothing obvious seems to be missing, but files were definitely searched, especially Uncle Montgomery's business records and personal papers." "Any indication of how the intruder entered the estate grounds?" Saul asked. "None. The gates were locked. No signs of forced entry, no tracks in the gardens. Whoever came here knew the property well enough to move without being detected." "Inside job, then," I said. "Someone with access to the estate and knowledge of the bunker. That's what I'm afraid of. It means I can't trust my own staff." Saul and I followed her through the house to the wine cellar and the concealed entrance. She worked the combination, different from yesterday, as Wolfe had instructed, and the steel door swung open. We descended into the bunker's first level. The disturbance was immediately obvious. Filing cabinets stood open, papers scattered on the desk, bookshelves disheveled where someone had pulled volumes out, looking for hidden compartments. The searcher had been thorough, but not careful. They'd prioritized speed over concealment. Saul moved through the space methodically, examining everything without touching. He had the professional's discipline of preserving crime scenes while extracting information from them. "The intruder knew what they wanted," he said after 15 minutes. "This wasn't random vandalism. They focused on filing cabinets and document storage. They were looking for papers, records, letters, something on paper." "Business records?" I asked Constance. "Possibly. Uncle Montgomery kept extensive files down here: contracts, correspondence, financial documents. He didn't trust banks completely, so he maintained copies of everything important." "What about the key?" I held up the Victorian brass key we'd been investigating. "Any indication someone was searching for locks this might open?" Saul examined several drawers and cabinets. No obvious attempts to force locks. They were looking for documents, not locked containers. We moved to the second level where Montgomery Holloway had died. This area showed less disturbance. A few drawers opened, papers rifled, but nothing like the systematic search on the first level. "They spent most of their time upstairs," Saul observed, "which suggests whatever they wanted was in the business records, not personal effects. Or they were interrupted and fled before completing the search," I said. "Possible, but the entrance door was locked when Miss Holloway arrived this morning. If the intruder was interrupted, they took time to secure the door behind them. That suggests confidence, not panic." I examined the communications room, radio equipment, maps, civil defense materials. Nothing appeared disturbed. The kitchen and storage areas were untouched. Whoever had broken in had specific targets and ignored everything else. We descended to the third level, mechanical systems. This area was completely undisturbed. The generators hummed steadily. The air filtration system cycled on schedule. The water tanks stood full and sealed. "No interest in the equipment," Saul said. "They weren't sabotaging anything, just searching for documents." We returned to the first level, and I photographed the disturbed areas while Saul made detailed notes. Constance watched anxiously. "What do you think they were looking for?" she asked. "Something your uncle possessed that someone else wants badly enough to risk breaking in here," I said. "Business records, letters, possibly evidence of something illegal or embarrassing." "Or," Saul added, "they were looking for something your uncle hid, something valuable or dangerous that only he knew about." "Like what?" "Money, jewels, classified documents, blackmail material. Your uncle built a $2 million fortress. People don't build fortresses, unless they have something worth protecting. We finished documenting everything and returned to the surface. Constance locked the bunker entrance with the new combination, and we gathered in the main house's study. "I need to interview your household staff," I said, starting with Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper. Constance nodded and sent for her. Mrs. Brennan appeared 5 minutes later, a small, elderly woman with white hair and the kind of gentle face that made you think of grandmothers and fresh-baked cookies. She looked nervous, hands clasped in front of her apron. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm Archie Goodwin. This is Saul Panzer. We're investigating Mr. Holloway's death and the recent break-in at the bunker. Can you tell me about finding Mr. Holloway's body?" She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "It was terrible, Mr. Goodwin. Just terrible. Wednesday morning I went to the bunker to bring Mr. Holloway his breakfast. He'd spent the night down there, as he often did. When I reached the entrance door, it was locked. I called through the intercom, but there was no answer. I waited an hour, called again, still nothing. That's when I telephoned Miss Holloway." "Did Mr. Holloway often spend entire nights in the bunker?" "Oh yes, several times a week. He'd go down in the evening, lock himself in, and emerge the next morning. He said he was testing the bunker's livability, making sure all systems worked properly." "Did anyone else have access to the bunker?" "Only Patrick Dunn for maintenance, and Thomas Garrick occasionally to help with heavy lifting. But they couldn't enter without Mr. Holloway's permission. He controlled the combination lock." "Did Mr. Holloway ever mention the brass key we found in his hand when he died?" She frowned. "What key?" I showed her the Victorian key. She examined it carefully, then shook her head. "I've never seen that before. It's beautiful, but it doesn't belong to anything in this house that I know of." "How long have you worked here, Mrs. Brennan?" 30 years. I came when Mr. Holloway first bought this estate. I've seen everything in this house 1,000 times. If that key opened something here, I'd recognize it." "What was Mr. Holloway's state of mind in the days before his death?" "Agitated, nervous. He'd been receiving telephone calls that upset him. He wouldn't say who from, but he'd pace his study for hours afterward. The last week, he barely slept. He spent almost all his time in the bunker, as if he was hiding from something." "Did he mention being afraid of anyone specifically?" "No, but he asked me to be vigilant about strangers on the property. He wanted to know if anyone had tried to enter the grounds, if any unfamiliar vehicles had been seen nearby. He was watching for something, or someone," Saul said. After Mrs. Brennan left, we interviewed Thomas Garrick, the groundskeeper. He was perhaps 50, stocky and weathered, with the practical competence of someone who'd worked outdoors his entire life. He confirmed Mrs. Brennan's account. Montgomery Holloway had become increasingly nervous in his final weeks, spending more time in the bunker, asking about security. "Did you notice anyone unusual on the property?" I asked. "No, sir. I patrol the grounds daily, check the gates and fences, watch for intruders. If someone had been prowling around, I'd have noticed." "What about last night, when the bunker was broken into?" "I was off property. Saturday's my evening off. I visit my sister in White Plains. Didn't return until this morning." "And Patrick Dunn?" "Patrick was here, far as I know. He lives in the cottage behind the main house. He'd have heard if someone drove up." We interviewed Patrick Dunn last. He was perhaps 35, lean and intelligent looking, with the focused competence of an engineer who understood complex systems. He'd been responsible for installing and maintaining all the bunker's mechanical equipment. "The break-in troubles me," he said when I asked about it. "That entrance lock is sophisticated. Combination mechanism with multiple tumblers, virtually impossible to crack without specialized knowledge. Whoever opened it either knew the combination or is a professional safecracker." "Could you open it without knowing the combination?" "Given enough time and the right equipment, possibly, but it would take hours, and I'd likely leave marks." Miss Holloway said the lock showed no damage. "So someone knew the combination. Who besides Montgomery Holloway?" "No one. As far as I know, Mr. Holloway was obsessive about security. He changed the combination monthly and never wrote it down. He memorized it." "Could someone have observed him opening the lock?" "The wine cellar has no windows. If someone wanted to spy on him entering the combination, they'd need to be inside the cellar with him, and Mr. Holloway would never have allowed that." "What about the bunker systems? Any way to access it through the ventilation, the electrical conduits, the water system?" "The ventilation shafts are too narrow for human passage. The electrical and water systems are completely sealed, no access points that could be exploited. The bunker was designed to be impenetrable from both outside attack and internal compromise. That was Mr. Holloway's obsession. Yet someone got in. Yes, which means either the design has a flaw I don't know about, or someone knew something about that bunker that Mr. Holloway never revealed to me. After the interviews concluded, Saul and I gathered in the study with Constance Holloway to compare notes. 3 staff members, all with opportunity, I said. Mrs. Brennan found the body. Patrick Dunn knows the bunker's systems intimately. Thomas Garrick was conveniently off property when the break-in occurred. But none of them had motive, Constance said. Uncle Montgomery paid them extremely well and treated them fairly. Why would any of them kill him? Money is always a motive, Saul said. Did your uncle leave anything to his staff in his will? Small bequests, 10,000 each for long service. Nothing that would motivate murder. Then we're back to the documents, I said. Someone broke into the bunker searching for papers. They're either looking for something valuable your uncle possessed, or something incriminating they desperately need to retrieve. Or, Saul added, they're looking for the same thing your uncle was hiding, the thing that Victorian key opens. Constance looked at the key on the table between us. Whatever that key opens, it's important enough to kill for, and to risk breaking into a locked bunker to find. Which means it's still hidden somewhere. I said, your uncle died clutching that key, trying to protect it or point toward it. We need to figure out where. We left the estate at 9 o'clock, driving back through cold darkness. Saul was thoughtful, processing everything we'd learned. The locked room problem is fascinating, he said. Someone killed Montgomery Holloway inside a sealed bunker, then locked the door from outside using a combination only Holloway knew. That's impressive. Wolfe says he's close to solving it. I'm sure he is. But here's what interests me. Why return to the bunker after the murder? If you've successfully killed someone and staged it as natural death, why risk breaking in again? Because whatever you were after wasn't on the body or in plain sight. You needed time to search properly. But you waited 6 days between the murder and the break-in. Why? That was a good question. Maybe waiting for police investigation to conclude, or waiting for opportunity when the estate was less guarded. Or, Saul said, the break-in and the murder were committed by different people. Someone killed Montgomery Holloway, someone else broke in searching for something. 2 separate crimes with 2 separate perpetrators. I thought about that. Possible, but both crimes involve accessing a locked bunker. That's a significant skill set. How many people could do that? Not many, which is why Wolfe will solve this. He's good at narrowing down impossible suspects to the one possible killer. We reached Manhattan at 10:30. I dropped Saul at his apartment and returned to West 35th Street. The brownstone's windows glowed warm against the cold night. Fritz let me in, and Caesar and Mars appeared for their inspection ritual. Both dogs sniffed me carefully. I'd picked up scents from the estate and the bunker, then allowed me to pass. Wolfe was in his chair, reading a book about Byzantine architecture. Loyal raised his head from near the desk, tail thumping against the floor in greeting. Minerva watched from the bookshelves, and Diana was somewhere upstairs on patrol. Learn anything? Wolfe asked without looking up from his book. I reported everything. The break-in, the searched documents, the staff interviews, and Saul's theory about 2 separate perpetrators. Wolfe closed his book and set it aside. Mr. Panzer's theory is plausible but incorrect. The same person who killed Montgomery Holloway broke into the bunker last night. They're searching for something they couldn't retrieve during the murder itself, possibly because Holloway hid it, or because they didn't have time to search thoroughly while staging the death scene. What are they searching for? Whatever that Victorian key opens, Holloway died clutching it, which suggests it was important enough to hold on to, even as he realized he was dying. The killer knows the key exists, and knows it opens something valuable. They're searching for that something. Any progress on solving the locked room problem? Yes. I believe I understand how it was accomplished. Tomorrow you'll return to the estate and conduct a test to verify my theory. If I'm correct, we'll know the method. Once we know the method, identifying the killer becomes straightforward. Care to share the theory? Not until verified. Premature theorizing leads to confirmation bias. We'll test first, then conclude. I recognized that tone. Wolfe had solved the impossible part, and was now working on proving it. By Monday, he'd have the killer identified and probably invited to the brownstone for a dramatic confrontation. Classic Wolfe. I went upstairs to bed, brain spinning with locked doors and mysterious keys and $2 million fortresses that couldn't keep their owners safe. Tomorrow we'd test Wolfe's theory. And then we'd catch a killer. Sunday morning brought clear skies and sharp cold, the kind of November day that makes you grateful for central heating and hot coffee. I was at breakfast with Wolfe when the telephone rang. Fritz answered in the kitchen, then appeared in the dining room doorway. "Mr. Goodwin, Inspector Kramer is calling. He says it's urgent." I went to the office and picked up. "Morning, Inspector." "Goodwin, I need to speak with Wolfe, now." "He's having breakfast. Can it wait?" "No, put him on." I covered the mouthpiece. "Kramer says it's urgent." Wolfe's expression showed his usual displeasure at interruptions during meals, but he rose and came to the office. He picked up his desk extension with visible reluctance. "Yes, Mr. Kramer?" I listened on my line. Kramer's voice was tight with anger. "Wolfe, there's been another death at the Holloway estate. Patrick Dunn, the maintenance man, found dead in the bunker this morning. Same circumstances as Montgomery Holloway. Seated in a chair, no obvious trauma, appears to be heart failure. The estate is now an active crime scene." Wolfe's eyes opened fully. "When was the body discovered?" "An hour ago, Constance Holloway went to check the bunker and found him. She called us immediately. I've got detectives and medical examiner on site now." "Was the bunker entrance locked?" "Yes. Same combination lock. Same sealed door. And before you ask, yes, we're treating this as suspicious. 2 deaths in the same location under identical circumstances. I don't believe in coincidences." "Nor do I. What was Patrick Dunn doing in the bunker?" "No idea. Miss Holloway says she didn't authorize him to enter. Far as she knows, he shouldn't have been there. Yet he was, and now he's dead. Mr. Kramer, I believe I understand how these murders were accomplished. I'll need to examine the bunker myself to verify my theory." "You're coming here? To Westchester?" "Yes. The locked room method requires physical verification. I'll arrive within 2 hours. Please preserve the scene and allow me access." "You know I hate it when you withhold theories." "I'm not withholding. I'm verifying. Premature conclusions are worse than no conclusions. We'll discuss everything when I arrive." Wolfe hung up. I stared at him. "You're leaving the brownstone? Voluntarily?" "The locked room problem requires physical examination. I cannot solve it from my chair, much as I'd prefer to. We depart in 30 minutes. "Should I call Saul?" "Yes. And Fritz. Tell him I'll miss lunch. He'll be distraught, but it can't be helped." Fritz was indeed distraught. He'd been planning roast chicken and was visibly pained at the thought of Wolfe missing it. But he helped prepare for the journey, coffee in a thermos, sandwiches wrapped carefully, and instructions for the dog's care while we were gone. Caesar and Mars watched our departure with concern. They knew something unusual was happening when Wolfe put on his overcoat and hat. Loyal followed us to the door, ears pricked forward, sensing significance. I drove with Wolfe occupying the passenger seat, like a monument. He rarely leaves the brownstone, and when he does, he treats the experience as a form of martyrdom to be endured with stoic suffering. Saul met us at the estate, and together we approached the main house where Constance Holloway stood on the steps, looking shaken. "Mr. Wolfe, thank you for coming. This is horrible. First Uncle Montgomery, now Patrick. What's happening?" "Murder, Miss Holloway. Systematic and calculated. Show me where Patrick Dunn was found." We descended to the bunker. The entrance door stood open, held by a police detective. Inside, the first level was crowded with investigators. Inspector Kramer was directing operations, and he nodded grimly when we entered. "Wolfe, the body's on the second level, same location where Montgomery Holloway died." We descended the spiral staircase. Patrick Dunn sat slumped in the same chair where Montgomery Holloway had been found, head tilted back, eyes closed. A medical examiner was conducting preliminary examination. "Initial assessment?" Kramer asked. "Heart failure, similar to Montgomery Holloway. No obvious trauma, no defensive wounds. TOD approximately midnight last night. I'll know more after autopsy." Wolfe studied the scene carefully, eyes moving from the body to the chair to the surrounding area. "Was anything found in his hand?" No. Unlike Montgomery Holloway, Patrick Dunn wasn't clutching anything when he died. Interesting. Mr. Kramer, I need to examine the bunker's entrance mechanism and the ventilation system. After that, I'll explain how these murders were accomplished. We spent the next hour with Wolfe inspecting every detail of the bunker's construction. He examined the entrance door's combination lock, the ventilation shafts on all 3 levels, the mechanical systems, and the structural layout. He made notes in a small book he'd brought, occasionally asking Saul or me to measure specific dimensions or test particular mechanisms. Finally, he gathered everyone: Kramer, the detectives, Constance Holloway, the household staff in the bunker's first level. I can now explain how both Montgomery Holloway and Patrick Dunn were murdered in what appeared to be a locked, impenetrable room. Everyone leaned forward. Even Kramer looked interested, despite his usual skepticism. The key to understanding these murders, Wolfe began, is recognizing that the bunker entrance was not the only access point. There is a second way to enter this fortress, a way the architect never intended, and the construction crew never documented. The ventilation shafts, I said. No, the shafts are too narrow and too well filtered. The second entrance is far simpler and more elegant. It's the combination lock itself. Kramer frowned. The lock? That makes no sense. The lock can only be opened by someone who knows the combination. Correct. But what if someone knows the combination? What if Patrick Dunn, the man responsible for maintaining all the bunker's systems, had learned Montgomery Holloway's combination through careful observation over months or years? Constance gasped. Patrick, you think Patrick killed Uncle Montgomery? No, I think Patrick Dunn knew the combination, and someone else used him to gain access. Let me explain the complete sequence. Wolfe walked to the entrance area, gesturing at the combination lock. Montgomery Holloway changed his combination monthly, but he had to enter it twice daily, once entering, once exiting. Patrick Dunn worked in this bunker regularly, maintaining equipment. Over months, he could have observed Holloway entering the combination, memorizing the sequence through repeated observation. But Patrick had no motive to kill Montgomery Holloway. Constance protested. I agree. Patrick Dunn was not the killer. He was an unwitting accomplice. Someone else learned that Patrick knew the combination, that someone convinced or coerced Patrick to provide it. Using that combination, the killer entered the bunker while Montgomery Holloway was inside, murdered him, and locked the door from outside, creating the appearance of an impossible locked room death. And Patrick's death? Kramer asked. Patrick realized what he'd done, that his knowledge had enabled a murder. He may have confronted the killer, or the killer may have simply decided Patrick was a liability. Either way, the killer used the combination again to enter the bunker, this time with Patrick inside. Patrick was killed in the same manner as Montgomery Holloway, establishing a pattern that points away from the truth. What manner? I asked. How were they actually killed? Wolfe turned to the medical examiner. Both victims showed heart failure as cause of death, correct? Yes. Sudden cardiac arrest. Induced cardiac arrest. The killer used a method that causes heart failure without leaving obvious physical evidence, likely a drug or poison that metabolizes quickly and is difficult to detect in routine toxicology. The medical examiner looked thoughtful. There are substances that can induce cardiac arrest, potassium chloride, certain pharmaceutical drugs, but they require injection or ingestion. Neither victim showed injection sites, and neither had consumed anything immediately before death. Not injection or ingestion, Wolfe said. Inhalation. The killer used a gas or aerosol that caused cardiac arrest when breathed. Both victims were seated in the same chair, in the same location. The killer approached from behind, released the substance, and left while the victim was incapacitated. That would require specialized knowledge, Kramer said. Medical or chemical expertise. Yes, which narrows our suspect pool considerably. We're looking for someone with medical or scientific training, someone who knew Patrick Dunn well enough to extract the combination from him, and someone with strong motive to kill Montgomery Holloway. Who? Constance asked. Who fits that description? I don't yet know, Wolfe admitted, but I know how to find them. The Victorian key Montgomery Holloway died clutching. That key opened something the killer desperately wants. They broke into the bunker searching for it and failed to find it. They killed Patrick Dunn either because he confronted them or because they feared he'd expose them. The key leads to motive, Find what the key opens, and we'll identify the killer." Kramer looked frustrated. "So you've solved the locked room problem, but not the actual murder. That's half a solution, Wolfe." "It's sufficient progress for one morning. Archie will continue investigating. We'll identify the killer within 48 hours. We left the bunker with Kramer grumbling about partial solutions and incomplete theories. Constance Holloway walked us to the car, looking worried. "Mr. Wolfe, if the killer has been inside the bunker twice now, could they come back again?" "Yes, which is why you should not visit the bunker alone, and why you should change the combination immediately. Also, dismiss your household staff temporarily. Send them on paid leave. The killer may be among them or using them as sources of information." "I'll do that today." The drive back to Manhattan took 90 minutes through Sunday traffic. Wolfe sat silently, processing everything. Saul rode with us, and we discussed the case in fragments. "So Patrick Dunn observed Montgomery Holloway entering the combination over months," I said. "Someone learned this and convinced Patrick to share it. That someone then used it to commit 2 murders. The question," Saul said, "is who knew Patrick Dunn well enough to extract that information, and who had sufficient motive to kill Montgomery Holloway?" "Someone with medical or scientific expertise," I added. "Someone who could acquire or create a substance that induces cardiac arrest through inhalation. And someone desperate to find whatever that Victorian key opens," Wolfe said. "The killer has committed 2 murders and is still searching. That suggests whatever is hidden is valuable beyond measure, worth multiple lives and enormous risk." We reached the brownstone at 3:30 p.m. Fritz met us at the door with visible relief. He'd been worried about Wolfe venturing outside. Caesar and Mars conducted their inspection, and Loyal greeted us with unusual enthusiasm, tail wagging vigorously. The dogs had missed us. Wolfe settled behind his desk with a deep sigh of satisfaction. "I will not leave this brownstone again until this case is resolved. The outside world is cold, uncomfortable, and insufficiently equipped with proper beer." Fritz brought beer immediately. 2 bottles, perfectly chilled. Wolfe poured and drank with the expression of a man returning to civilization after wilderness exile. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll investigate Montgomery Holloway's business associates, medical contacts, and scientific connections. Someone in his circle had the knowledge and opportunity to commit these murders. Also, research that Victorian key, consult locksmiths, antique dealers, anyone who might identify its origin." "And tonight?" "Tonight, I'll review everything we know and determine what we've missed. The key is central to motive. It opens something Montgomery Holloway valued enough to die protecting. Identify that something, and the killer's identity will follow." I spent the evening typing reports while Wolfe sat in his chair, eyes closed, thinking. The dogs maintained their evening patterns, and the brownstone felt secure and warm after the day's adventures. 2 people were dead. A killer was still searching for something hidden, and somewhere in Manhattan, the answer to a Victorian key's purpose waited to be discovered. We had 48 hours to find it. The clock was ticking. Monday morning arrived with frost on the windows and the kind of bitter cold that makes Manhattan feel like the Arctic Circle. I was at breakfast with Wolfe, grilled kidneys and scrambled eggs for him, toast and coffee for me, when the telephone rang. Fritz answered and appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Goodwin, a Mr. Lawrence Hendricks wishes to speak with you. He says he's Montgomery Holloway's attorney and has urgent information." I went to the office and picked up. "Archie Goodwin." "Mr. Goodwin, this is Lawrence Hendricks of Hendricks, Marsh & Company. I've been Montgomery Holloway's attorney for 20 years. I understand you're investigating his death on behalf of Miss Holloway." "That's correct." "I have information that may be relevant. Can you come to my office this morning? There are matters I can only discuss in person, and they concern documents Mr. Holloway entrusted to me before his death." I covered the mouthpiece and relayed the message to Wolfe, who'd followed me to the office. "Go," Wolfe said. "Attorneys possess information clients hide from everyone else. If Holloway entrusted documents to his lawyer, they're likely significant." I agreed to meet Hendricks at his office at 10 o'clock and hung up. This might be the break we need. Holloway knew he was in danger. Mrs. Brennan said he was agitated and nervous before he died. Maybe he gave his attorney insurance documents. Possibly. Also visit the antique locksmith I use, Herman Schultz on Lexington Avenue. Show him the Victorian key. If anyone can identify its origin and purpose, it's Schultz. After breakfast, I caught a taxi to the financial district where Hendricks, Marsh & Company occupied 3 floors of a limestone building near Wall Street. The receptionist directed me to a corner office where Lawrence Hendricks waited, a man in his 60s, silver-haired and dignified, with the careful manner of someone accustomed to handling other people's secrets. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for coming. Please sit." His office was all dark wood and leather, lined with legal volumes and framed diplomas. He gestured to a chair and settled behind his desk. "Montgomery Holloway was my client for 2 decades, he began. "I handled his business affairs, estate planning, and various legal matters. 3 weeks before his death, he came to me with unusual instructions." "What kind of instructions?" "He wanted to revise his will, standard procedure, but he also gave me a sealed envelope with specific directions. If he died under any circumstances other than obvious natural causes, witnessed by multiple people, I was to open the envelope and deliver its contents to investigators. Given that he's now dead under circumstances his niece considers suspicious, and given Patrick Dunn's death yesterday, I believe those conditions have been met." He opened a desk drawer and removed a manila envelope sealed with red wax and Montgomery Holloway's signature across the seal. He broke it open carefully and extracted several documents. "The first is a letter," Hendricks said, handing it to me. I read, "If you're reading this, I'm dead and circumstances suggest murder. I've been threatened, though I don't know by whom. I've discovered something dangerous, information that puts me at risk. I've hidden evidence in a safety deposit box at the Manhattan Provident Bank, a private institution on 5th Avenue. The box is number 447. The key is Victorian brass, 3 inches long with scrollwork. I keep it on my person always. The box contains bearer bonds worth $8 million and documents proving that certain government officials profited from classified weapons contracts during World War II. These officials are now in positions of high authority. They want the documents destroyed and the bonds recovered. I suspect one of them will kill me for both. The documents name names, provide transaction records, and include signed confessions from deceased co-conspirators. If I'm dead, these documents must be made public. They prove corruption at the highest levels of government and military. Trust no one in authority. The conspiracy reaches too high." Montgomery Holloway. I read it twice, then looked at Hendricks. $8 million in bearer bonds and evidence of government corruption. That's certainly motive for murder. Indeed, Mr. Holloway was frightened when he gave me this. He said he'd stumbled onto this information while researching Cold War defense contracts for his own business purposes. He found irregularities, contracts awarded to specific companies with no competitive bidding, payments far exceeding standard rates, and evidence that government officials received kickbacks. He documented this extensively. He said the documents in that safety deposit box could destroy careers and possibly send people to prison. But he also said the people involved were powerful enough to have him killed rather than risk exposure. Did he name anyone specifically? No. He said naming them put me at risk. He wanted me insulated from danger. Consider it, given that he's now dead and so is Patrick Dunn. Hendricks paled. You think I'm at risk? If the killer learns you have this information, possibly. What else is in the envelope? He handed over additional documents, a copy of the safety deposit box agreement with Manhattan Provident Bank, showing box 447 registered to Montgomery Holloway, and a letter of authorization allowing bearer of the Victorian key to access the box contents. The bank requires 2 things for access, Hendricks said. The key itself, and proof of identity linking you to Montgomery Holloway's estate. Miss Holloway can provide that authorization as his heir. Where is Manhattan Provident Bank? 5th Avenue, near 47th Street. It's a private institution catering to wealthy clients who want discretion. No federal oversight, no public records, complete confidentiality. Perfect for hiding $8 million and incriminating documents. I thanked Hendricks, collected everything, and caught a taxi uptown. At the brownstone, Wolfe had just finished his morning plant room session and was settling behind his desk with beer. Caesar and Mars were positioned at their usual posts, and Loyal raised his head from near Wolfe's feet as I entered. "Read this," I said, handing him Montgomery Holloway's letter. Wolfe read carefully, his expression growing more interested with each line. When he finished, he set the letter down and drank beer. $8 million in bearer bonds and evidence of government corruption. Our motive becomes clear. Someone among those corrupt officials learned that Montgomery Holloway possessed documents that could destroy them. They killed him to retrieve those documents and the bonds. And they used Patrick Dunn's knowledge of the bunker combination to gain access. Patrick died because he either realized what he'd enabled or because the killer decided he was a liability. The question now is, which corrupt official? Holloway didn't name names in his letter, which means we must determine who among his government contacts had both motive and the scientific expertise to commit murder using an inhalable cardiac arrest agent. I'm visiting the bank next to retrieve the box contents. Then we'll have the complete list of conspirators. Take Saul with you. If the killer has been watching and given the break-in and Patrick Dunn's death, they clearly have, they may attempt to intercept you at the bank. $8 million and career-destroying documents are worth considerable violence. I called Saul, who agreed to meet me at the bank. Then I visited Herman Schultz's locksmith shop on Lexington Avenue. Schultz was an 80-year-old German immigrant who'd been making and identifying keys since before World War I. If anyone could tell me about the Victorian key, it was him. His shop was a cramped space, crammed with keys of every description, hanging on walls, filling drawers, displayed in cases. Schultz himself sat at a workbench, examining something through a jeweler's loupe. He looked up as I entered. Archie Goodwin. It's been long time. You need key made? I need a key identified. I handed him the Victorian brass key. He examined it carefully, turning it in the light, studying the wear patterns and construction. This is beautiful work, hand-forged probably 1880s or 1890s, made by craftsmen who took pride. See scroll work, that signature of maker, very distinctive. What does it open? Safety deposit box, I think. Banks in that era used keys like this for their private vaults, very secure, very elegant. This particular style, he consulted a reference book crammed with key illustrations. Yes, Manhattan Provident Bank. They commissioned keys from this maker for their vault boxes. Box number would be engraved on corresponding lock, not on key itself. How many boxes did Manhattan Provident have with keys like this? Perhaps 200, maybe 300. They've been in business since 1870s, catered to wealthy families who wanted privacy. Very exclusive, very discreet. They still exist? Oh yes. Still on Fifth Avenue, still private, still serving old money. You have box number. Box 447. Then this key opens that box, almost certainly. The wear pattern suggests it's been used regularly for many years. Someone accessed that box often. I thanked Schultz and headed to Manhattan Provident Bank. It occupied a narrow building with a marble facade that screamed old money and discretion. Saul met me outside, looking alert. Expecting trouble? He asked. Montgomery Holloway died protecting what's in this bank. Patrick Dunn died because he enabled access to Holloway's bunker. If the killer knows we're retrieving the documents, they might try to stop us. Then let's be careful. Inside, the bank was hushed and elegant. Marble floors, mahogany paneling, tellers behind brass cages. A manager in a morning coat approached. May I help you, gentlemen? I'm here to access safety deposit box 447. I have authorization from Montgomery Holloway's estate. I presented Constance Holloway's letter authorizing me as her representative, along with the Victorian key. The manager examined everything carefully. One moment, please. He disappeared into a back office. 5 minutes later, he returned with a ledger. Box 447 is registered to Montgomery Holloway. Deceased. You have proper authorization and the key. If you'll follow me to the vault. We descended stairs to a basement vault, a large room with walls lined with brass-fronted boxes of various sizes. The manager located box 447, used a master key in one lock, then gestured for me to use the Victorian key in the second lock. I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, exactly as Schultz had predicted. The manager pulled the box from the wall and carried it to a private viewing room, a small chamber with a table and chairs. You may examine the contents privately. Ring when you're finished. He left, closing the door. Saul and I opened the box. Inside were two items, a leather portfolio bulging with documents, and a sealed envelope containing negotiable bearer bonds, certificates worth millions, untraceable, essentially cash. I opened the portfolio. The documents were explosive. Contracts from 1943-1945 showing military procurement deals between the US government and private manufacturers. But the irregularities were obvious, even to my untrained eye. Contracts awarded without competitive bidding, prices far above market rates, payments routed through shell companies, and most damning, handwritten notations showing kickbacks paid to government officials. The names were prominent. Walter Cunningham, now a senator from Connecticut. James Pritchard, currently Deputy Secretary of Defense. Robert Ashworth, a federal judge. 3 men in positions of enormous power and authority, all implicated in wartime profiteering and corruption. "This is dynamite," Saul said quietly. "If these documents are authentic, they could destroy careers and send these men to prison. And they're probably authentic." Montgomery Holloway was meticulous. He wouldn't have kept these unless they were verified. So one of these 3 men, Cunningham, Pritchard or Ashworth, learned that Holloway had this evidence. They killed him to retrieve it. Which one has medical or scientific knowledge? The killer used an inhalable agent that causes cardiac arrest. That requires expertise. Saul paged through the documents. Pritchard was Army Medical Corps before his political career. Cunningham was an engineer with chemical companies. Ashworth was just a lawyer. No scientific background. So Pritchard or Cunningham. Both had the expertise and the motive. I carefully repacked everything, and we left the bank with the box contents secured in a leather briefcase I'd brought. Outside, I scanned the street for threats. Nothing obvious, but I had the uncomfortable feeling we were being watched. We caught separate taxis back to the brownstone, standard security protocol when carrying valuable or dangerous materials. I arrived first, and Caesar and Mars conducted their usual inspection before allowing me inside. Wolfe was in the office, and I handed him the portfolio. He spent 30 minutes reading through the documents, occasionally making notes. Finally, he looked up. "These documents are comprehensive and damning. If made public, they would destroy Senator Cunningham's career, force Deputy Secretary Pritchard's resignation, and likely result in Judge Ashworth's impeachment. Any of these men had sufficient motive for murder. Pritchard and Cunningham both have scientific backgrounds that would enable them to create an inhalable cardiac agent. Ashworth doesn't. Then our suspects are 2, Cunningham and Pritchard. Both powerful, both desperate, both capable of arranging murder. We need to determine which one knew Patrick Dunn well enough to extract the bunker combination from him. How do we do that? Research their connections to Westchester, to the estate, to anyone in Montgomery Holloway's household. Someone established contact with Patrick Dunn, gained his trust or coerced his cooperation, and obtained the combination that someone killed Holloway, then killed Patrick when he became a liability. I spent the afternoon researching. Senator Cunningham had a home in Connecticut, about 40 miles from the Holloway estate. Deputy Secretary Pritchard lived in Washington, but had family in New York. Either could have made contact with Patrick Dunn. At 5 o'clock, Constance Holloway called. "Mr. Goodwin, I've been going through Uncle Montgomery's papers. I found something odd. Correspondence with Deputy Secretary Pritchard, dating back 10 years. They had some kind of business relationship." "What kind?" "Uncle Montgomery consulted on military contracts during the war. He had expertise in munitions manufacturing. Pritchard was his contact at the War Department. They remained in touch afterward." "Did your uncle mention Pritchard recently?" "Yes, about 6 weeks ago. He said Pritchard had called, asking about old business records. Uncle Montgomery refused to discuss it over the phone. He said some things were too dangerous to talk about casually." "Did Pritchard visit the estate?" "I don't know, but if he did, he would have met Patrick Dunn. Patrick managed all visitors who needed access to Uncle Montgomery's private papers stored in the bunker. That was it. The connection. James Pritchard had known Montgomery Holloway for years, knew about his meticulous record-keeping, and after learning that Holloway possessed incriminating documents, had visited the estate to retrieve them. During that visit, he'd met Patrick Dunn and learned about the bunker's combination lock. Over subsequent visits, Pritchard had observed Patrick and Holloway, learned the combination through Patrick's inadvertent revelation, and planned his murder. I reported everything to Wolfe. He listened, then nodded slowly. James Pritchard, Deputy Secretary of Defense, former Army Medical Corps, with expertise in chemical and biological agents, wartime profiteer who stole millions while soldiers died with inadequate equipment. He learned that Montgomery Holloway possessed documents proving his crimes. He cultivated access to the estate, observed Patrick Dunn's knowledge of the bunker combination, and planned a murder that would appear to be natural death in a locked room. And when the break-in failed to recover the documents, he killed Patrick Dunn to silence him. Precisely. Now we must prove it. Tomorrow morning, invite Pritchard to the brownstone under some pretext. Tell him we've recovered documents he might be interested in, offer to sell them discreetly. He'll come because he's desperate. And then I'll demonstrate how he committed 2 murders and extract a confession. Inspector Kramer will be present to make the arrest. You're that confident? I'm that certain. Pritchard made mistakes. They always do. We'll expose them systematically until he has no option but to confess or face overwhelming evidence. I called James Pritchard's office in Washington and reached his secretary. I explained that I represented Montgomery Holloway's estate and had documents Deputy Secretary Pritchard might be interested in acquiring privately. Within an hour, Pritchard himself called back. Mr. Goodwin, I understand you have documents from Montgomery Holloway's files. What documents specifically? Wartime contract records that mention your name. I thought you might want to review them before they're made public as part of estate disposition. Silence for 3 seconds. Then I'll be in New York tomorrow morning for meetings. I could stop by your office around 10 a.m. Where are you located? I gave him the brownstone's address. After he hung up, I grinned at Wolfe. He took the bait. He'll be here at 10. Excellent. Call Kramer. Tell him to arrive at 9:45. I want him present but concealed when Pritchard arrives. Also call Saul. I'll want additional witnesses. You're assembling quite a crowd for this confrontation. Murder deserves an audience, particularly murder committed by government officials who betrayed public trust for personal profit. James Pritchard will face justice tomorrow morning, assuming he confesses. He'll confess. He has no other option. We have the documents proving his wartime corruption. We have the method he used to commit locked-room murder. We have his connection to Patrick Dunn and opportunity to learn the bunker combination. When confronted with overwhelming evidence, even powerful men break. That evening, over Fritz's superb dinner of lamb chops and roasted vegetables, Wolfe was unusually talkative. Pritchard represents a particular species of criminal, he mused, the respectable monster. He wears a suit, holds high office, and speaks eloquently about public service while secretly stealing millions and murdering those who threaten his secret. Such men are more dangerous than common thugs because their positions grant them legitimacy and protection. Until someone like you exposes them. Until evidence forces exposure. I'm merely the instrument. The documents Montgomery Holloway preserved. Those are what will destroy Pritchard. Holloway knew he was in danger, but refused to be intimidated. He documented everything, hid it securely, and left instructions for its revelation. He protected the truth beyond death. That's courage. And it cost him his life. Yes, but not his purpose. Tomorrow, when Pritchard is arrested, Montgomery Holloway's courage will be vindicated. The corrupt will face justice, and the evidence he died protecting will serve its intended purpose. That's victory, even if posthumous. I went to bed thinking about locked-room murders, government corruption, and the mathematics of justice. 2 people were dead. Tomorrow, their killer would face arrest. And in his underground fortress, Montgomery Holloway's ghost could rest knowing his evidence had survived, and his murderer would pay. Justice delayed, but not denied. Tuesday morning arrived cold and grey. I was up at 7, preparing for the confrontation. Fritz laid out coffee and pastries, understanding that today was significant. Wolfe descended from his bedroom at 8:30, earlier than usual, another sign that he considered this case important. By 9 o'clock, we had the office arranged. I'd positioned extra chairs for witnesses. Saul arrived at 9:15, alert and ready. Inspector Kramer appeared at 9:45, accompanied by Sergeant Stebbins and a police stenographer. This better not be another one of your theatrical wastes of time, Kramer growled, taking position near the bookshelves where he'd be visible to Pritchard but not immediately threatening. It will be efficient, conclusive, and legally sound, Wolfe assured him. The stenographer will record everything. You'll have a complete confession within an hour. Confident. Certain. The dogs sensed unusual activity. Caesar and Mars had positioned themselves strategically, Caesar near the office door, Mars by the window. Apollo patrolled the hallway. Minerva and Diana maintained upper-floor watch. Loyal stayed close to Wolfe, as if understanding his human needed particular protection today. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Through the one-way glass panel, I saw James Pritchard on the stoop, a distinguished man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive overcoat and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like exactly what he was, a high-ranking government official accustomed to authority and deference. Caesar growled low, sensing something wrong about this visitor. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body in the gap. "Deputy Secretary Pritchard, come in." He entered, and Caesar's growl intensified. Mars moved closer, both dogs assessing this stranger with obvious suspicion. Pritchard noticed and took a step back. "Your dogs seem aggressive. They're protective, and they're excellent judges of character. Follow me." I led him to the office. He entered and stopped, seeing Kramer, Stebbins, Saul, and the stenographer. His expression tightened. "What is this? You said we'd discuss documents privately." "Sit down, Mr. Pritchard," Wolfe said from behind his desk. "We're here to discuss 2 murders you committed, Montgomery Holloway and Patrick Dunn. Inspector Kramer is present to arrest you once you've confessed." Pritchard's face went white, then flushed red. "This is outrageous. I'm a Deputy Secretary of Defense. You can't accuse me." "Sit down." Something in Wolfe's voice made Pritchard obey. He sank into the red leather chair, gripping his briefcase. "I'm not answering any questions without my lawyer present." "You don't need to answer questions. You need only listen while I explain how you committed 2 murders in what appeared to be an impenetrable locked room. When I'm finished, you'll confess because remaining silent will be pointless. The evidence against you is overwhelming. I want to leave." "Inspector Kramer, is Mr. Pritchard free to leave?" Kramer moved to block the doorway. Caesar and Mars had positioned themselves between Pritchard and the exit. "No, he's a material witness in a murder investigation. He stays until we've finished questioning." Pritchard looked trapped, which he was. Wolfe opened a folder and removed documents, the wartime contracts showing Pritchard's corruption. "Montgomery Holloway discovered your crimes, Mr. Pritchard. During World War II, while serving as a procurement officer in the Army Medical Corps, you awarded contracts to specific manufacturers who paid you kickbacks. You stole millions while American soldiers died from inadequate medical supplies. Montgomery Holloway documented this extensively. These documents prove your guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Those documents are forgeries. They are authenticated with signatures, transaction records, and confessions from your co-conspirators, now deceased conveniently for you." Montgomery Holloway was meticulous. He knew these documents would be challenged, so he ensured they were unassailable. "Even if those documents were real, that doesn't mean I killed anyone." "Doesn't it? 6 weeks ago, you learned that Montgomery Holloway possessed evidence of your crimes. You contacted him, asked about old business records, tried to determine what he knew. He refused to discuss it over the phone. "Too dangerous," he said. "So you visited his estate in Westchester." "I never visited that estate." "You did. Multiple times, under various pretexts. During those visits, you met Patrick Dunn, the maintenance man responsible for the underground bunker where Holloway stored sensitive documents. You observed Patrick's access to the bunker, learned about the combination lock, and over several visits, managed to observe Holloway entering the combination. Patrick noticed, but didn't realize what you were doing. You were careful, patient, methodical. This is speculation. It's deduction based on evidence. On October 26th, you used the combination you'd memorized to enter the bunker while Montgomery Holloway was inside alone. You brought with you a chemical agent, potassium chloride in aerosol form, or possibly another substance from your Army Medical Corps expertise. You approached Holloway from behind while he sat reading, released the agent, and waited while he suffered cardiac arrest. He realized he was dying, grabbed the Victorian key he kept on his person, the key to this safety deposit box containing evidence against you, and clutched it as he died, trying to point toward the truth. Pritchard's hands were shaking. "I was in Washington that night. I have witnesses. You flew to New York that afternoon, drove to Westchester, committed murder, and returned to Washington by morning. Commercial flights, rental car under a false name, all arranged carefully. But you made mistakes. Your name appears in the visitor log at the estate, showing multiple visits. Patrick Dunn mentioned to the housekeeper that a government official had been asking detailed questions about the bunker's systems. You left traces. Circumstantial. And last Saturday night, you returned to the estate and broke into the bunker searching for the documents you couldn't retrieve during the murder. Montgomery Holloway hadn't told you about the safety deposit box. You searched his files desperately but found nothing. You realized Patrick Dunn knew you'd obtained the combination from him and might connect you to the murder. So Sunday night, you killed him the same way, entering the sealed bunker, releasing your chemical agent, and leaving while Patrick died. I want my lawyer now. The medical examiner will test for specific chemical residues that wouldn't have been detected in initial autopsies. Potassium chloride, aerosolized pharmaceuticals, whatever you used leaves traces. Once we know what to look for, we'll find it. And once we find it, your expertise in military chemical agents will make you the only possible suspect. Pritchard sat frozen, calculating options. Wolfe pressed forward relentlessly. You made 3 critical errors, Mr. Pritchard. First, you assumed Patrick Dunn would remain silent about your observations of the combination lock. But Patrick was increasingly troubled and might have spoken to investigators. Second, you assumed the documents were stored in the bunker where you could retrieve them, but Montgomery Holloway was too clever for that. Third, you assumed cardiac arrest would be accepted as natural death without detailed chemical analysis, but 2 identical deaths in the same location inevitably draw suspicion. Even if everything you've said is true, and I'm not admitting anything, you can't prove I killed anyone. You have theories, not evidence. We have the documents proving your motive. We have your connection to Patrick Dunn and opportunity to learn the combination. We have your expertise in chemical agents. We have witness testimony placing you at the estate. And most importantly, we have this. Wolfe produced a photograph, something I hadn't seen before. This is from the bunker's security system, which you didn't know existed. Patrick Dunn installed a hidden camera 6 months ago at Montgomery Holloway's request, concerned about potential intruders. The camera operates on battery power, independent of the bunker's electrical system. It photographed you entering the bunker the night Patrick Dunn died. Pritchard lunged forward, grabbing for the photograph. That's impossible. It's real. The camera was concealed in the ventilation grill, activated by motion sensors. We retrieved the film yesterday. You're clearly identifiable, Mr. Pritchard. The timestamp shows you entering the bunker at 11:47 p.m. Sunday night. 43 minutes later, you exited. Patrick Dunn died during that window. Pritchard sank back into his chair, face ashen. There must be an explanation. There is. You murdered Patrick Dunn, exactly as you murdered Montgomery Holloway. You used your knowledge of chemical agents to commit murders that appeared to be natural deaths. You exploited Patrick's knowledge of the combination to access a sealed bunker. And you did all this to protect yourself from exposure as a wartime profiteer who stole millions while soldiers died. Kramer moved forward. James Pritchard, you're under arrest for the murders of Montgomery Holloway and Patrick Dunn. You have the right to remain silent. Wait. Pritchard's voice was barely a whisper. Wait. I'll tell you everything. I want a deal. Testimony against the others. Cunningham, Ashworth, in exchange for reduced charges. There are no reduced charges for double murder, Kramer said coldly. But cooperation might influence sentencing. Talk. Pritchard sagged, defeated. It was the documents. When Montgomery called and asked about the wartime contracts, I knew he'd found something. I visited him, tried to determine what he knew. He was coy, evasive. I realized he had everything. Contracts, kickback records, probably even our communications, $8 million and my entire career. So you killed him, I said. I had no choice. He was going to expose everything. 20 years of building my career destroyed by some paranoid billionaire and his obsession with record keeping. I studied the bunker, observed the combination, planned carefully. The potassium chloride aerosol was easy. I still have contacts at Army Medical. I entered, administered it, and left. It should have looked like natural death. But you couldn't find the documents. They weren't in the bunker. I searched everywhere during the break-in. Nothing. I realized he'd hidden them somewhere else. The safety deposit box, obviously. But I didn't know which bank, which box. And then Patrick started asking questions, wondering about my visits, mentioning to his housekeeper that something felt wrong. He was going to figure it out. So I did what was necessary. You killed him. To protect myself. Don't you understand? I've spent 30 years in government service. I couldn't let it all be destroyed by documents from a war that ended 10 years ago. You stole millions while soldiers died from inadequate medical supplies, Wolfe said quietly. You murdered 2 men to conceal that theft, and you call yourself a public servant. You're a parasite who betrayed every principle of duty and honor. Pritchard looked at him with hatred. You don't understand how things work. Everyone takes their share. I just took mine. No, Kramer said, snapping handcuffs on Pritchard's wrists. Not everyone. Most people have integrity. You don't. James Pritchard, you're under arrest for 2 counts of first-degree murder. The stenographer has recorded your confession. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Stebbins and 2 uniformed officers who'd been waiting in the hallway escorted Pritchard out. The man who'd been Deputy Secretary of Defense looked small and broken, shuffling between police officers, the weight of his crimes finally crushing him. After they'd gone, Kramer turned to Wolfe. The photograph. There was no hidden camera, was there? No. I manufactured that detail to break his resistance. But the confession is genuine and admissible. He confessed voluntarily after being properly informed of his rights. You manipulated him. I exposed him. He confessed because he realized the evidence was overwhelming, even if one specific piece was fabricated. His guilt is absolute, and his confession complete. Justice is served. Kramer shook his head but didn't argue. I'll need the documents from the safety deposit box for evidence. They're being prepared for your custody. You'll also want to investigate Senator Cunningham and Judge Ashworth. The documents implicate them as well. One case at a time. Wolfe. I've got a deputy secretary confessing to double murder. That's enough for today. After Kramer left, Saul, Constance Holloway, who'd arrived during the confession and had watched from the hallway, and I gathered in the office. The dogs had relaxed now that the threatening visitor was gone. Caesar settled near the door, Mars by the window, Loyal near Wolfe's desk. It's over, Constance said quietly. Uncle Montgomery can rest now, and Patrick Dunn's family will know he was a victim, not an accomplice. Both men died protecting truth, Wolfe said. Montgomery, by preserving evidence of corruption. Patrick by unwittingly enabling that evidence to survive. Their deaths mattered. Justice has been achieved. What happens to the $8 million in bearer bonds? I asked. They belong to Montgomery Holloway's estate, Constance said, which means they're mine now. But I'll be donating them to a charity in Uncle Montgomery's name, perhaps something for veterans, since he felt so strongly about preparedness and protection. Appropriate, Wolfe said. And the bunker? I'm having it sealed permanently. It's a fortress that couldn't protect its owner. Let it remain buried and forgotten. She left shortly after, looking relieved. Saul departed with her to ensure she reached home safely. I settled at my desk and began typing the final report. Wolfe sat in his chair drinking beer, looking satisfied. Impressive work, I said. You solved an impossible locked-room murder, exposed government corruption, and got a confession from a Deputy Secretary of Defense. Not bad for a week's work. Adequate. The locked-room aspect was intellectually stimulating. The corruption was predictable. Powerful men stealing while hiding behind positions of authority. Montgomery Holloway's courage was admirable. Patrick Dunn's death was unfortunate, but unavoidable once he became a witness. And the Victorian key? A perfect piece of evidence. It pointed toward the safety deposit box, which contained the complete motive. Without that key, we might never have understood why Montgomery Holloway was killed. He died protecting it. He died protecting what it represented, proof of corruption and theft. The key itself was merely a symbol. But symbols matter, Archie. They remind us that some things are worth dying for, and that truth survives even when those who champion it do not. That evening, over Fritz's celebratory dinner of duck and champagne, we discussed the case in detail. Wolfe was particularly interested in the psychology of James Pritchard, a man who'd spent 30 years building a respectable career while hiding his wartime theft. Pritchard represents a common American tragedy, Wolfe mused. The man who achieves success through corruption and spends decades terrified of exposure. He could have confessed his crimes 20 years ago, accepted punishment, and lived honestly thereafter. Instead, he compounded theft with murder, destroyed 2 lives to protect his secret, and ended up exactly where he feared, arrested. disgraced, facing prison. The irony is exquisite. He would have gotten away with it if Montgomery Holloway hadn't documented everything. Which is why documentation matters. Holloway understood that memories fade, witnesses die, and oral testimony can be denied. But documents survive. They provide permanent, irrefutable evidence. Pritchard stole millions, and Holloway documented every penny. Pritchard murdered twice, and his own confession, now documented by the police stenographer, will convict him. Justice requires evidence, and evidence requires meticulous preservation. Like your case files. Precisely. I document everything because memories are fallible, and witnesses unreliable. Written records are truth made permanent. At midnight, I went up to bed, satisfied with the case's resolution. 2 murders solved, a corrupt government official exposed, and justice achieved for the victims. The next morning's newspapers screamed headlines about Deputy Secretary Pritchard's arrest. By afternoon, Senator Cunningham and Judge Ashworth had resigned their positions, facing their own investigations based on Montgomery Holloway's documents. A week later, Constance Holloway delivered our fee, $25,000 plus expenses, paid without complaint. She also sent a letter thanking us for giving her uncle justice and peace. The letter sat on Wolfe's desk for several days. Finally, he filed it away with other correspondence from satisfied clients. A good case, he said over lunch. Intellectually challenging, morally significant, financially adequate. We prevented 3 corrupt officials from continuing their careers and brought justice for 2 victims. Satisfactory outcome. Better than satisfactory. You solved an impossible crime. No crime is impossible, Archie. They only appear impossible until properly understood. The locked room, the sealed bunker, the combination lock, all were obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But every obstacle has a solution. One need only look carefully, think systematically, and refuse to accept impossibility as an answer, and occasionally fabricate evidence about hidden cameras. That was theatrical necessity. Pritchard needed a final push toward confession. I provided it. The ends justified the means. Inspector Kramer might disagree. Inspector Kramer got a confession that solved 2 murders and exposed government corruption. I doubt he's complaining. He was right. Kramer sent a bottle of good whiskey to the brownstone the following week. His way of acknowledging that Wolfe's methods, however unorthodox, had achieved justice. A month after James Pritchard's confession, on a cold December afternoon, I read in the newspaper that the former deputy secretary had pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for life imprisonment without possibility of parole. He'd also agreed to testify against Senator Cunningham and Judge Ashworth in their corruption trials. The article mentioned that bearer bonds worth $8 million had been donated to veterans' charities by Montgomery Holloway's estate, and that a scholarship fund in Patrick Dunn's name had been established for engineering students. At the bottom of the article, almost as a footnote, the underground bunker where Holloway died has been permanently sealed by his niece, who said she wanted no reminder of her uncle's paranoia or the tragedies that occurred there. I showed the article to Wolfe over lunch. He read it while eating braised beef and root vegetables, then set it aside. Appropriate conclusions. Pritchard faces life imprisonment, which is lenient considering he deserves execution. The corrupt officials will likely receive nominal sentences due to their connections and expensive lawyers, but at least they're exposed and disgraced. That's partial justice. And the bunker's sealed. No more fortress. A fortress that failed its purpose. Montgomery Holloway spent $2 million building an impenetrable shelter, yet he was murdered inside it. The lesson is clear. Physical barriers provide illusion of security, not reality. True protection requires vigilance, intelligence, and allies. Holloway had documents and courage, but he lacked the wisdom to trust others with his evidence before his death. That oversight nearly allowed Pritchard to escape justice. The Victorian key saved the case. Without it, we'd never have found the safety deposit box. The key was a clue Holloway left deliberately, clutching it as he died to point toward the truth. Even in his final moments, he fought to ensure his evidence would survive. That's remarkable courage and presence of mind. Think anyone else will try to access that sealed bunker? Maybe looking for hidden valuables? Unlikely. The entrance has been filled with concrete. The estate is under new security, and the world knows the bunker contained nothing but death. It will remain buried, a monument to one man's paranoia and another man's crime. That evening, I was typing final reports when Fritz brought me a package that had arrived by messenger. It was from Constance Holloway, wrapped carefully with a note attached. Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Wolfe, I wanted you to have this as a remembrance of Uncle Montgomery and the case you solved. It seemed appropriate. With deepest gratitude, Constance Holloway. Inside was the Victorian brass key, polished and mounted on a wooden plaque with a brass plate engraved, Montgomery Holloway, 1892-1950. I showed it to Wolfe. He examined the key carefully, running his fingers over the scrollwork. A fitting memorial. The key that opened the truth about corruption and murder. It deserves preservation. Where should we put it? On the shelf near my desk. When clients arrive with impossible cases, they can see physical evidence that impossible crimes are solvable. The key will serve as reminder that every locked room has an opening, every sealed vault has access, and every criminal, no matter how powerful or protected, can be exposed. I mounted the plaque on the shelf where Wolfe indicated. The Victorian key caught the lamplight, its ornate scrollwork creating shadows against the wood. Think we'll ever have another locked room case? I asked. Eventually, criminals are endlessly creative in constructing elaborate scenarios designed to appear impossible. But we'll solve it, as we solved this one, because impossibility is merely misdirection, and truth is patient. It waits to be discovered by those willing to look carefully and think logically, and occasionally lie about hidden cameras. Strategic fabrication in service of justice, a necessary tool when dealing with criminals who think themselves untouchable. Outside, snow began falling, the first of winter. Inside, the brownstone was warm and secure. Caesar and Mars patrolled downstairs. Apollo, Minerva, and Diana maintained their usual positions throughout the house. Loyal dozed near Wolfe's desk, occasionally lifting his head to check that his humans were safe. The case of the billionaire's bunker was closed. 2 murderers were caught, corruption exposed, and justice served. The underground fortress remained sealed, its secrets buried, except for those that mattered, the evidence that had destroyed James Pritchard and the courage of Montgomery Holloway, who died protecting truth. Not perfect justice. Never perfect. But sufficient. And in this imperfect world, sufficient justice was all anyone could hope for. I finished my typing, filed the reports, and settled into my chair with a book. Wolfe was already deep in a volume about orchid cultivation, occasionally making notes. The dogs had settled into evening contentment. Fritz was preparing tomorrow's shopping list in the kitchen. Another case solved, another killer caught, another small victory against chaos. The work would continue. It always did.